The following program contains material of an enlightening nature. Open-mindedness is advised.
Today, I want you to open your mind.
I've almost come to the conclusion that the story is so damning that the mass of people can't deal with it.
We are in process of developing a whole series of techniques to get people actually to love their servitude.
We face a hostile ideology, global in scope, atheistic in character, ruthless in purpose, and insidious in method.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence.
To change the minds and the attitudes and the beliefs of the people of the world, and especially the United States, to bring about one world socialist totalitarian government.
The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
As you connect the dots between different people, organizations, places, religions, history, suddenly the picture starts to form. You don't connect the dots, it's just a mass of what's all this about.
The kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure.
Someone born in the United States is not more special than someone born in Mexico. Someone who is white is not more special than someone who is black. They're just vehicles for the consciousness to experience.
Brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people.
War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength.
Humans as a species are prone to amnesia. Those who do not remember the past are doomed to repeat it. It is thus imperative that these all-important matters be thoroughly explored and not left up to blind faith.
It's about time some of you got acquainted with the real hard truth.
What you are now experiencing is the vibration of air particles being transformed into electrical signals by your senses and DNA, then sent to the brain where they are decoded into sounds. I'm your host, Ryan Gable, and you are listening to The Secret Teachings. Our website is www.thesecretteachings.info, where you can find links to listen to the show on the L&M Radio Network, K98 Talk, Planet Paranormal, and several other internet and terrestrial radio stations. On the website, thesecretteachings.info, you will also find a link at the top of the page that says The Secret Teachings Archive. If you click that link, you will find a full list of all of our past episodes that you can download or stream for free without having to sign up or give us any of your information. You just click the link and you can download the show for free. You'll also find a top news tab on the website, thesecretteachings.info. And if you click that top news tab, you will find an assortment of blue links to news articles in the mainstream media, some in the alternative media. Sometimes they're articles that we've written or that the other people we know have written, and we'll post them up on the website. And the reason that I use a lot of mainstream articles, I know that kind of confuses people because this is looked at as kind of an alternative type of radio show, even though it's not really alternative, and I think it's a stretch to even say that it's independent. I don't like using these terminologies. But anyway, when I use the mainstream news articles, this show really started out in 2009, a little bit before that actually, even before I came aboard. The original version of the D Show, which was the original name, and then once I came aboard over a couple of years, I changed the name to The Secret Teachings. About 6 years later, here we are. But anyway, the show started out as a way to examine the mainstream media stories and to break them apart and to detail the in-betweens and the in and outs that aren't really discussed. The best example I can give you is when you look at a lot of the mass shootings that take place, a lot of the school shootings, a lot of violent acts in the news. Even in some of the news reports that we see about this in the mainstream, there's never a connection made between the violent outbursts and the fact that many, if not all, of these perpetrators are actually on some type of pharmaceutical drug. A lot of the times they're on the same drug as the mass shooter or the bomber or the the person who plotted to blow up some government institution or whatever the case may be. And they're reported on in the media, in the mainstream, in the same news article where we hear about this guy, such a bad person, and then they tell us about how he's on all of these drugs, but I guess that has no correlation to the violent actions that he took. So we put together pieces of the puzzle like that, and we've got a bunch of them today. I've got about a dozen news articles to go over with you here in the first hour of today's show. And then in the second and third hour, hopefully we'll have him this long, we have the director of the Farsight Institute, Courtney Brown, who will be joining us to discuss their latest venture, a remote viewing experiment, I guess you could say, into Cydonia on Mars. And I watched the last video that Courtney sent me of the remote viewing taking place, the two remote viewers, and what they found in the past, present, on Cydonia and Mars from this remote viewing. Now, a lot of people probably look at remote viewing and they think that's just made up, that's just kind of conspiracy, that's paranormal, that stuff's just a little bit out there on the fringe, Ryan. Well, the government spent millions and millions and millions of dollars on remote viewing. I know for sure during the Gulf War in the 1990s to find quote-unquote weapons of mass destruction or other biological chemical weapons, and to see where soldiers were stationed, or to find to find prisoners of war behind enemy lines. The government used these programs, and in fact, Courtney Brown's institute and the remote viewers that he works with, they use some of these same government techniques in their remote viewing. And I talked to Courtney Brown about, was it like 6 months ago, when myself and Michael Vera interviewed him on The Last Frequency, which airs every Wednesday here on the L&M Radio Network at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 p.m. Pacific. And we talked about the 9/11 remote viewing, which was really fascinating. And now they've done one about Cydonia and Mars. And one of the main reasons that I think that I wanted to get Courtney Brown on the show this soon, I was going to hold off until maybe June or July, but I got an email from a listener, and they said, hey, check out this guy named Courtney Brown, check out this remote viewing stuff. It's pretty cool. And the same day that I got that email, I actually got a call from another co-host of mine, Kevin Annette, over on Radio Free Canada. I host another show Sundays on the BBS radio network at 4 p.m. It's 4 p.m. my time, so that would be 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And when I talked to Kevin, he said, hey, this week, and this was 2 weeks ago, let's talk about remote viewing. And talk about remote viewing and some of the psychics we had come in to examine some of the mass graves of children found at the Mohawk residential schools in Canada. And I thought about it for a second. I was thinking, I asked Kevin, I said, did you send me an email about remote viewing? And he said no. And then I realized it must have been a listener of my show or one of the other shows here on L&M. And the next day I got another email from another person saying, check out this Courtney Brown guy. He's got some really good stuff about Cydonia and Mars. And all of this happened at the same time I'm reading M. Don Shorn, his books on the theory of the ancient ones, or the elder gods, if you will. And the chapter that I was reading was talking extensively about Mars and about a civilization that had existed there before, and it was a long, complex theory in his 3 books that he's written, but before they moved to Earth and this human-like species came into conflict with these elder gods, if you will, who were kind of the purveyors of the universe, who wanted to gradually give mankind technology as opposed to these beings who ignorantly wanted to flaunt it. And, of course, humans chose the flaunting aspect of the technology rather than trying to gain a very ethical and moral standpoint before touching this advanced technology. But that's really besides the point. But I was reading that about Mars, and then it just kind of clicked with me. I saw 2 emails from 2 listeners. Then my co-host, or the host of Radio Free Canada, Kevin, mentions remote viewing to me. And then I see this stuff about Mars, and I'm reading M. Don Shorn's book, and I just thought, wow, there's some type of synchronistic connection here. I've got to get him on. We've got to talk about this and see what happens. And we were supposed to have him on last week, but, he had some computer issues. I guess his motherboard and his computer fried, which is not the first time that's happened. I've had several guests before tell me the exact same story before they come on my show. Their computer it gets fried or something along those lines. So I'm not sure if that has to do with me and what we're talking about here, or if it's just a coincidence. But, as investigators and researchers, as I try to consider myself that in any sense of the word, we really can't take, coincidence as a matter of fact. We can't believe in coincidence, if you will. Anyway, though, Courtney Brown, who is the director of the Farsight Institute, he'll be joining us in the second and third hour. And if you want to check out his website now, it is F-A-R, Sight, S-I-G-H-T, Institute.com. It is FarsightInstitute.com, and you can check out all of their work on remote viewing. Pretty interesting stuff. Here in the first hour, though, I did want to focus on the news. I know a lot of people are still talking about Baltimore, and I spoke about it on another radio show, a couple radio shows this week, actually, on L&M. I spoke about it on Ira's Open Eyes Radio. I spoke about it a little bit on the Last Frequency Wednesday. But if you missed it, I actually aired a special edition of The Secret Teachings that I recorded this week, and it aired yesterday, Saturday, and the 2nd of May. And that's one day, of course. Today's the second day after May 1st, which is the end of the Beltane Festival, the day after Walpurgis Nacht, which is Walpurgis Night, the goddess Walpurgis, part of the Beltane Festival. And this is really, really important stuff, and I would cover it again today. The problem that I have is that there's just really not enough time to go through all of the news and then to talk to Courtney Brown and to detail Baltimore once again. Although I don't want to bring too much attention to it because of my beliefs in what Baltimore really is, what's taking place there, what took place there, what's really happening. I think it's a mass ritual. I think that there's a lot of energies in and outside of this dimensional plane that are influencing what's happening there. The simple fact, I told somebody the other day about like 2 weeks ago, I said, you watch. I guarantee you watch and see every year this happens. You watch from April 19th to May 1st, there is going to be a big story in the news about fire, some type of explosions, fire, death, sacrifice. Something's going to happen. And this person just kind of, they took it for what it was and they just kind of wrote it off. And I wasn't really predicting anything that didn't have substantial backing to it. And when the time came about, April 22nd, 23rd, we hear about these riots in Baltimore. And what happens? Well, if you look in the news, and you really don't have to pay attention to it too much, but you have to just have kind of an open mind, and you read some of the headlines at the very least. You see some of the live emergency broadcasts, if you will, at the top of some of the news sites. Breaking news. It all talked about fire. 27 cars on fire, Baltimore on fire, Baltimore ablaze, fire trucks on fire, fire everywhere. Breaking news, Baltimore in flames, rioters looting and throwing bricks and bottles and starting fires and lighting fires and blowing things up. This fire is part of the Beltane Festival. I detailed all of that in a 2-hour special that aired yesterday. And you will be able to get a copy of that now if you go to thesecretteachings.info. It's absolutely free to download or stream. I'll have it on the homepage. It should be labeled 5/2/15, so May 2nd, 2015. And one of the most important aspects of the Baltimore situation is simply the name Baltimore. If you know anything about mythology or gods and goddesses, Baltimore, Baal, B-A-L, or B-A''A-L, is another name for Bel, the Beltane Festival, B-E-L. Baal, Bel, the Canaanite Phoenician sun or fire gods like Wotan or Votan, and other names for Nimrod and variations of Osiris. I mean, these are just different mythological beings, but Baal or Bel, other versions of Moloch, the owl, fire sacrifice, like at the Bohemian Grove. This all has a very, very, very strong stench of something that's taking place. Personally, I'm starting to think outside of our dimensional perceptions, something that's happening outside of our range of view, something that's happening outside of really all of our control. I think something is really hacking in to this dimensional plane of existence and orchestrating all of this. And the more and more we put people's attention and focus our attention on what's happening in Baltimore, people are scared, they're anxious, they're afraid, they're nervous, and all of that gets put into the earth. And I believe that it can be absorbed, and as it's absorbed, it's being used for less than good purposes, if you will. Little dark, sinister motives perhaps taking place here. And I believe the same thing with the 2012 London Olympics. And prior to that, you had the shooting in Aurora, Colorado with James Holmes. And, of course, that was brought up in the news during these riots in Baltimore. There was another school shooting up in Washington State. A lot of stuff going on, and there's just really not enough time to cover it all. So, again, thesecretteachings.info. You will be able to find that episode of The Secret Teachings, a special edition. It's only 2 hours, and I will go into all of the details about the Baltimore Festival, the Beltane Festival that took place in Baltimore. And I'm sure they're still cleaning up the remnants of what's left over from those riots. And, racism is just one aspect of it. I mean, this is a lot more deep than just, the name Baltimore. It's a lot deeper than just the name of the news station, WBAL Channel 11, one of the names of Satan. The K is the 11th letter in the alphabet, which is one of the reasons Aleister Crowley put that at the end of the word magic, M-A-G-I-C-K. So Baltimore and Baal, the sun god. So the number 11 is a number of Satan as well. So what we have here is just another situation, another event where the masses of attention are diverted to a specific location, and what we have is some type of ritual, some type of sacrifice going on. I mean, that's really what I believe. I mean, I really don't know how else to look at it. So what we have in the news this week, ladies and gentlemen, I have to take a break sometimes. I have to take a deep breath because I don't really know how. I don't know how people can view what happens in what we perceive to be reality and just think, not that things are okay, but just think that, I guess I don't know. I most of the time I just kind of become lost with words. I don't even know what to say most of the time anymore. I just kind of examine things and then I walk past them and I try to say, hey, look how blatant this is, and people say, it's just racial hatred. It's not just racial hatred. It's much more than that. But let's go ahead and get to the news. I have about 12 news articles here, and we've got about 45 minutes to go through these news stories before we have Courtney Brown on the program. So the first news article I have, is the universe 3D or just a hologram? This comes from upi.com/science news. And this is from Vienna. It says, new and ongoing research suggests physicists are using one too many dimensions to explain the universe. They say the cosmos can be mathematically explained using just 2 dimensions. The universe isn't 3D, in other words. It is, as it was described in a recent Vienna University of Technology press release, the image of 2-dimensional processes on a huge cosmic horizon. And they say that the universe is a hologram. They say the universe is a hologram. We've seen a lot of news stories like this where researchers at universities all over the world, not just here in the United States, but all over the world, are claiming that the universe is a holographic projection. And this goes back several decades. It's not just something that's been brought to the public's attention recently. There have been people in what you might call the fringe community who have been talking about this concept for quite a while. I've also heard theories such as, as we are kind of locked in to this dimensional wavelength of white light, if you will, this very small fraction of what we can observe with our senses. We have several senses that are turned off. 97% of our DNA, scientists don't at least openly understand it. A portion of our brain is turned off. Parts of our DNA, the chromosomes, have been changed and altered in a very genetic manipulation type of fashion, if you will. And, you look at all of the dark matter and the dark energy that's expanding the universe that we can't see, and it just seems like humans have been trapped. We've been duped. We've been locked into this, I would call it a dimensional prison. And a lot of the times when I think and I talk about something like this, there's always this voice in the back of my head, if you will, or the back of my mind or my consciousness, maybe it's my subconscious, that just says that there's something more to this. When we come up with a question, for example, when humans come up with a question, and we can ask that question, and we may not know the answer to it automatically, but the simple fact that we can ask the question means that there has to be an answer to that question. At least that's what I believe in a dualistic kind of a way. So when we talk or think about concepts such as a holographic universe, and we think of other dimensional planes existing, which is mainstream science, and we think about things like dark matter, dark energy, we think about the expansion of the universe, we think about the speed of light, which is one of the theories that I've heard, is that the speed of light is really a barrier to this prison, if you will. And once you can break that, you break out of the matrix. I thought that was a very interesting concept. I've heard some researchers talk about that. I've kind of adopted that myself. From my understandings of my limited understandings of math and science and physics, this is at least what I tend to kind of look at and think that there's some credibility to it. I think that we have really been so conditioned to believe in these pre-established belief systems. It's like we were born and given a script, and we are now that character, and we never can break character. If we break character, everybody notices and everybody's attention turns to you. So like if you're on stage and you're in a play, and all of a sudden you break character, and you ask the other people on stage, can we take a break here? I've got to go to the bathroom, and you run off stage. Everybody's looking at you because you broke character. You broke the illusion that was the play, that taking people into an imaginative state, and you broke all of that. And that's what I kind of see here in reality as humans are born, and we give that wonderful birth certificate out, and it's traded on the stock market. Although I guess I could be arrested for saying that. And you have people that are just kind of given a script. They are given this idea of who they are, where they came from, what they are, and we're told this as an absolute, even though it's not an absolute. And what we're told as an absolute today turns out to be speculative opinion tomorrow. And then what we're told tomorrow turns out to be speculative opinion the next day. And these authoritative figures of science and religion and mathematics and these really intelligent big brains, they have all of these great ideas that just make things better. If our scientific communities as a whole are really advancing things so much that we have cell phones that are so thin. Literally, what was one of the phones? I don't remember what it was because I don't have an advanced knowledge of phones, but I think I don't know if it was the iPhone. One of the phones that came out recently was so thin that it was bending when people put it in their pocket. It was like bending to their skin because the metal was so thin. We have phones that are that thin, and what supposedly took astronauts to the moon was technology less than that, but in a big computer inside of a spaceship, inside of a little tin can. And now we have all of that technology and more in our pocket. So thin, it's like a microchip, and it can bend if you put it in your pocket the wrong way. That's where we are. But yet, we have an increase in heart diseases, we have an increase in Alzheimer's, an increase in autism, and large increases in cancer, increases in incurable diseases. We have a food distribution issue. We have geoengineering of the environment. One way or another, it's happening, whether it's being done to combat previous engineering or it's being done to spray us like roaches, spray us like we're insects, spray us like we're bugs. You have people who just simply never learn from history. History continues to repeat itself. We have all of these really strange things that should be resolved from the great scientific age that we have entered, and yet the more and more we hear about how advanced we are and how better than all the other species that could possibly exist in the universe, we still succumb to disease and illness and poverty and all the other forms of grief-strickenness that could be obtained here on this blue marble. Isn't it a little bit odd that with all the scientific advancements, we still can't change the way that things are? All we can do is seem to create technology to distract ourselves away from the way things are. And that's not scientific advancement in the sense of a betterment for everybody. It's scientific advancement and scientific oppression for the advancement and the concealment of the very few who really run the show, ladies and gentlemen. That is really what it is. Again, if you go to thesecretteachings.info, you'll find all of these news articles. I'm your host, Ryan Gable, and up on the website, I've also added some additional tabs, and I've added some additional things to the website. I'm going to change it up here soon just to kind of give it a new look. But the top news tab is still there. I think it's at the top right of the page, maybe the second line. There's like a black bar at the top, the second line down. It should say top news. You click that, and you can access all of these articles. Yeah, sometimes you click the link, and maybe I messed up. Okay, I messed up, and I didn't put the link in there, or I put a link to a wrong article. I'm human. I make mistakes. I can admit to that. I got an email one time from somebody saying, "Oh, you're a shill." Not literally, but you're fake because you said the article was there and I clicked it and there was no article. Well, listen, I just made a mistake and I didn't put the link in there. Okay, I'm not working for the government because I forgot to copy and paste. Just unbelievable. You talk about me being paranoid. Jesus Christ. The next article I have is from cnsnews.com, also CBS News. It says Earth not as warm as the climate models predicted. So I'm gonna give you about 5 seconds, okay? I'm gonna read that to you again. I'm gonna give you 5 seconds to think about what I just said. CBS says Earth not as warm as the climate models predicted. Now let's just think about that. Okay, Earth not as warm as the climate models predicted. And in this article from CBS, there's a picture of the volcano which erupted in Chile. The article here says, on the 24th of April, 2015 edition of CBS Evening News, a NASA scientist made a surprising admission about climate change during a report about an erupting volcano in South America. Correspondent Michelle Miller turned to Dr. Allegra Legrande, who detailed how the gases from a volcanic eruption can lead to a reduction in the amount of sunlight that reaches the Earth. Legrande added that this is a small component of why we're not as warm today as the climate models predicted we would be 7 years ago. Now, I have got an assortment of things that come to my mind when I read this and when I read this originally. We are literally told, ladies and gentlemen, as human beings, we are the cause of so much suffering on this planet. We are told that we are destroying this planet. We are told that this planet, which, according to mainstream scientific theory, we evolved from, we are now destroying this planet. We are told that the sun, which gives us vital nutrients, produces vitamin C and can actually stave off cancer, causes cancer, and that it's bad, and that we shouldn't go out in the sun. And I am just absolutely amazed every time I hear something like this. I was, the other day I was watching, somebody else was watching, what was it called? It was like Planet Earth, that documentary. And I caught just a few minutes of it, and they were talking about how there's certain regions of the Earth that haven't been affected by human activity. Well, the way that I see it is if humans spawned out of the Earth, even through some altered genetic process, it's not all humans who are causing this detrimental effect to the earth in any way, shape, or form. The average human is not dumping toxic waste into their local water supply. The average human is not genetically engineering the environment and the species of plants and animals. The average human being, in fact, not the average human being, almost every human being, 99.9% of humanity has nothing directly to do, indirectly they do, but directly to do with the programs that are set up to change the course of life on this planet in the next couple of decades. The way that I see it, it's the massive mega international corporations that are doing more to pollute and to change the face of this planet for their own selfish, financial, greedy wants than anybody else with a carbon footprint. And that's what it's all about. It's all about making you feel bad. The sun's not good. The sun's bad. Stay out of the sun. You're a detrimental thing to this planet that you evolved from. You should go and run away and hide. There's parts of the earth that have never been affected by humans. Well, that's a good thing. Let's not tell the big corporations about them. Hopefully there's no oil there, so we don't go there and destroy the landscape to make a couple billion. Everything that's based on this economic system of the finances and the way that we have it is something that is artificial in nature, ladies and gentlemen. And this goes back to the holographic universe. Everything is in terms of finances and economics, all this is artificial. These homes that we live in, these rigid walls and these 90-degree angles, this is not something that nature produces. This is something that man has created. And it is my firm belief that man is a species that has been not only genetically altered, but has been hijacked. Perhaps the hijacking is part of that genetic engineering, or the hijacking is something other dimensional. And I think that also will tie into what's happening in Baltimore, outside of this dimensional plane of existence, and as well as the article I mentioned a moment ago about this being a holographic projection, essentially, this entire universe. I think there's much more to reality than we tend to think. And the simple fact of the matter is humans really don't know anything. And if you think you know, well, go ahead and prove it. Because I guarantee you, no matter what proof you have for anything, there's always somebody else who tells you that you're wrong because they just don't want to believe it. And in their mind, their proof is their belief, and therefore they're correct. So how can we differentiate between what is right and wrong when people's belief systems get in the way, when people are programmed to grow up in a certain way? You have to be a Republican. You have to be a Democrat. You have to be a Libertarian. You have to be a Christian. You have to be a Muslim. And the few people that break away from that, if they're not taking part in one of those practices, they just fall to the other side. So if you grew up in a very scientific household, now you grow up and you rebel, so you become religious. You grow up in a religious household, you grow up and you become atheist. And I went through that transition myself before I found balance and equilibrium in the middle. Anyway, though, this article talking about climate change, they're saying, listen to this, NASA scientists are now saying that climate change, so these experts, these genius PhD big brain morons told us that climate change is rapidly occurring, the Earth is superheating, and that this is based upon their most accurate climate models and predictions. Yet, they forgot to take into consideration, I guess, the enormous number of volcanoes that are erupting, which, hell, that could be partially from the sun interacting with the Earth and causing earthquakes, causing volcanic eruptions. It could have to do with the imbalances of the gravitational effects of the moon. There's a lot of things that come into play here that NASA doesn't seem to want to mention. And these geniuses, these experts that predicted through their climate models, they predicted and told us it's a sure thing. The Earth is heating up, damn it. Now, because their climate models are wrong and we're seeing evidence of cooling on Earth, instead of admitting that they were absolutely incorrect, instead of admitting the United Nations just simply removed the medieval warm period from 800 AD to 1300 AD, where it was hotter than it was in the 1990s, and their explanation for this is that they burnt a lot of fires. People that say stuff like that, if you have a PhD, you should have your PhD stripped. You need to go back to kindergarten if you're that stupid. So instead of admitting that you're wrong, what they do is they say, well, what can we find as an excuse to show that, well, we were wrong, but we were actually right at the same time, because if it wouldn't have been for this unpredictable consequence of nature, our models would have been correct. How good of a scientist are you if you didn't take into consideration these other environmental factors? How much can we really trust your climate models and predictions when you didn't think about volcanoes as a possible scenario for blocking sunlight out? And how many volcanoes are exploding on a daily basis? How many really are exploding on a daily basis to the extent where it's actually begun to cool the Earth? The Earth wasn't impacted by an asteroid the size of Texas. It didn't throw up miles and thousands of hundreds of millions of tons of debris into the atmosphere. It didn't cause a nuclear winter. The volcano in Chile erupts. First time in 40 years it erupts. And that must be the cause of why the Earth is cooling down. Really? So now you want me to believe that line of bullshit when it's so clear that your previous climate models and predictions are only a little bit off because you didn't take into consideration volcanoes erupting. People that believe this garbage are the ones who are, when they're born, they're given that birth certificate, and then they're given the cue card that says you're a Democrat or you're a Republican. Here's what you believe. And people take the script and they say, okay, and they get on stage and they act it out their whole life. And if anybody like me is on stage and I say, hold on a second, I don't want to be in this play anymore, everybody's attention turns to me, and now I'm the person who's interrupting their good time. Here's a good time for you. Tyson Foods to cut human antibiotics in chicken by 2017. So it's only going to take them, another 2 years to cut the human antibiotics out of their food. That sounds delicious, and the reason that I brought that article up was because McDonald's, by the way, they actually removed, 6 or 7 sandwiches from their menu. If they just removed the rest of the menu, I think we'd be in good shape. All of these food companies are having to really change their menu. We've already talked about how they've changed the mascots. They've changed the image, as if you go to McDonald's now and there's a chandelier and wooden floors that makes the food any less disgusting, but it's a propagandizing association that you have that if there's a fireplace and there's a crystal chandelier, then this must be a fancy burger. It's a Royale with cheese. It must be a fancy burger because there's a chandelier hanging in here, and because Wendy's no longer some fat girl on TV. Wendy's is skinny, fake redhead on TV eating fake chicken nuggets. So Tyson's Food removing human antibiotics in chicken by 2017. And also in the news, ladies and gentlemen, Chipotle says that they've removed all GMO ingredients out of their food. And the article here says, Chipotle says it has completed phasing out genetically modified ingredients from its food, making it the first national fast food chain to do so. The Denver-based chain has already been using mostly non-GMO ingredients, but was working on making final changes to its tortillas. And that's, of course, the reason because of the corn. And, almost all the corn in this country is genetically modified. And the problem with that is that GM corn is so much a part of our agricultural system, it's next to impossible to remove even the contaminated parts of genetically modified corn from the non-genetically modified corns. I mean, contamination, pollen. The reason that the monarch butterflies died was because of contact with pollen that's carried by the wind. Our entire food supply has really been tampered with and altered to some extent. Even those like myself who try to eat non-GMO verified foods or try to at the very least eat organic, but then who the hell can trust the USDA? The Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, in this article, they say the FDA maintains that GMOs are safe and most of the country's corn and soybean crops are genetically modified to have certain traits like resistance to herbicides and plant diseases. They make it sound really good, right? Bill Nye, the science guy, changing his opinions on GMO crops after he takes a visit to Monsanto. So whatever they did, they either wrote him a check or they beat him with a bag of GM corn until he decided to rewrite his book. Whatever the case may be, he changed his mind, and now others are changing their minds. One direction, going towards saying that GMOs are safe, and other people who are becoming aware of it are saying that they just simply don't trust the genetically modified foods. You know, if I don't trust a company like Monsanto, who openly, you know, they sold Ajinomoto, the Japanese company, they sold that, and that company who manufactured Equal, Sweet and Low, aspartame. And, you know, Searle, GD Searle, which was the company that was run by Donald Rumsfeld, they manufactured aspartame. And, you know, Monsanto had a hand in this as well. As part of these artificial sugars are also genetically modified. And Monsanto distanced themselves away from lawsuits with them. They sold that Japanese company, that Japanese branch of the company, for Equal, Sweet and Low. And the companies that openly, I mean, we know for a fact that aspartame causes cancer, blindness, neurological issues. And yet it's allowed to be in the food supply. And see, when the FDA says that they have no evidence to show that GMOs are unsafe, well, they're telling you the truth. That's the terrible thing, is they're telling you the truth. They don't have any evidence to show that they're not safe. The reason is because they don't do studies, at least long-term studies, on the effects of the genetically modified foods. Because one, if you do the study and you find evidence to the contrary, the study is whitewashed and oppressed by the people who fund the FDA, the real food regulators, and those are the biotech companies themselves. Two, if you do the study and you find evidence that supports that GMOs are safe, it would automatically be put in the public arena. The problem is they've either done the studies and they've been suppressed, or they've done the studies and found that the GMOs are not safe, which is the case, and they get rid of them so they can legally say we don't have any proof of it. Or they get rid of them because of pressure from the biotech companies who threatened to sue the government for defamation and libel, just like Monsanto's filed a lawsuit against the World Health Organization for saying glyphosates cause cancer. They don't have the evidence because they've thrown it out simply, or because they just haven't done the studies at all. I guarantee you this. If the FDA did a study that showed indisputable proof against all naysayers that GMOs were safe to consume over multiple generations, they did not cause stomach lesions in rats, they did not cause gastrointestinal problems, they did not cause gluten intolerance, they did not cause an increase in allergies, I guarantee you would see this study and all the evidence therefore on every news network, on television, newsprint, and on the internet. But you don't see it because it doesn't exist, because they didn't do it, or because they've hidden it away in some chamber somewhere, or they've simply gotten rid of the research. That's the cold, hard truth. These people are not stupid. They're not stupid. They know what they're doing, and they know through their public relation arms how to manipulate your brain. They know how to manipulate your perception. Well, the FDA said they don't have any evidence. Well, of course they don't, because they threw it out, or they simply didn't do the studies in the first place. They're playing on your assumption that you believe the FDA is there to protect you, and they would have done every study they possibly could have to make sure GMOs are safe. They're playing on your blind faith and trust in them as a regulatory body to keep you safe. And as they play on that trust, they lie to you and say, no, we have no evidence. So you assume they must have done the studies and found no evidence. Show us the studies that show you that you have no evidence to show that they're bad. They can't show you because they've never done the damn studies. And the ones that they did do in the 1990s for the Flavastar tomatoes showed that 7 of the rats died almost instantly, and the rest of them, for the most part, developed these stomach lesions that tore their stomachs open. That's a fact. Not something you can make up. Those articles are available at thesecretteachings.info. If you're just joining us, I'm Ryan Gable, and I'm ranting. This is The Secret Teachings, our website, www.thesecretteachings.info. That's thesecretteachings.info. If you go to the website, you can find the top news tab with all of the news articles we are discussing right now. You will also find a list of all of our past episodes you can download or stream for free. And you'll find last night's new episode of The Secret Teachings that aired here on LNM about the Baltimore riots and the Beltane Festival, what's really going on there. Again, I didn't want to get too deep into that today because I don't want too much more attention from, from the people that listen to me. I don't want more attention diverted towards that event because it just feeds the energetic entities that are feeding off of that. I don't want to do that. I just want people to be aware of what's happening so we can bring light to the situation. I do have some more news, and by the way, if you've never listened to The Secret Teachings before, again, my name is Ryan Gable. The show's been around for about 5 or 6 years now at this point. I've written 2 books. One book is 740 pages. It's called The Grand Illusion, Slaves to Perception. You can get a copy of that at thesecretteachings.info. I give a lot of PDFs away, but you can buy the soft cover or the PDF on the website. I also wrote another book that is coming out here very soon. It's called False Prophets and the Lovers of Children, Disestablishing the Establishment. And that'll be coming out here within the next month or two, probably. I'll be able to sell and give away some copies of that. I've been researching all of the topics we've been discussing here for 6 or 7, about 7 years, but I've been doing radio for coming up on 6 years. And, I don't have any religious affiliations, no political affiliations, no financial backing whatsoever. In fact, I work just like everybody else during the week, and I'd like to be able to do this show more full-time. I'm working towards doing 2 shows on the weekend. I'd like to work into doing one of those shows live and work in maybe getting a couple of shows done a week live, but I would need support for that. I know there's a lot of you out there who already support LNM, and that money goes to keeping the network up. Other than that, I always ask for donations for The Secret Teachings separately because I need extra money so that I can try to cut back hours at work elsewhere so I can try to work on The Secret Teachings and bring to you more information. So if you do like what we're talking about today, if you like the Baltimore episode last week, if you like all of our episodes, and you'd like to support the show, you can do so at thesecretteachings.info. And at the top right of the page, you'll see a little flashing arrow. Click the donate button and send us a donation. Any donations over $15, and I'll send you a free PDF copy of my book, The Grand Illusion, Slaves to Perception. So you'll get the book anyway. It's 740 pages, so much information in it. You'll get that if you send us a donation. Sometimes I hand them out for free on the show. Just kind of depends on the mood that I'm in and the topics that we're talking about. So anyway, all of that is at thesecretteachings.info, so go ahead and go over there and check that out. And while you're there, you can click on the top news tab, and you can find this article as well. DARPA Magic Bullets. DARPA's magic bullets change course to hit moving targets. DARPA apparently has developed a new type of bullet that changes direction to strike a moving target. So I'm guessing this is probably the technology that killed Kennedy, maybe? The magic bullet? I don't know. Maybe this has been around for quite some time. Maybe this has been around for, 40, 50 years now. And DARPA's just showing it to us. I mean, I guess that kind of correlates with, different military bases that are, 5, 6 decades ahead of the technology that we have in the public arena. But anyway, there's a video of it here. Watch DARPA's magic bullets change course to hit moving targets. DARPA has developed some pretty scary stuff. Okay, DARPA has developed those walking dog robots. They've developed the humanoid robots that bust down your door. And, of course, it's all done under the guise of safety and protection. And we're going to pull Grandma out of her car if she gets into a car wreck. We've got this robot dog that balances itself. If you've never watched this video, it's pretty damn scary. You watch this dog not a real dog, but it's like this big dog-like robot with 4 legs, and they push it and it stabilizes itself. And if you watch it, it's really, really scary. And I'm not telling you to watch it so you be scared and you be really afraid and you go buy survival products. I'm just saying, look at what they're developing, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. Look at what they're developing for use in the civilian population. And if you don't think that I'm right, well, you're at battle, I suppose, with reality and with DARPA, because DARPA says that they're developing this for civilian use. But I'll buy it, it's going to be for keeping civilians safe and protected. Use it for emergencies, which they also said they were never going to use the bullets, the guns, or the militarized vehicles that are now rolling up and down the streets of Baltimore. That was a conspiracy theory, and look what we have. Lo and behold, that's exactly what's taking place. And by the way, if you ever heard of the Operation Jade Helm, one of the purposes of Jade Helm was to do this infiltration of civilian civilian ranks in different cities here on the West Coast, and some in the center of the United States, like Texas. And they were going to break parts of these states up into zones to extract dissidents. This was a practice scenario going on by the U.S. Marines and the U.S. military, and this is exactly what took place in Baltimore. They divided the city into fractions to extract dissidents. There's something more going on here, ladies and gentlemen. I just thought you might want to be, somewhat aware of that. Here's the next article I have. BBC News, new mass extinction event identified by geologists. It says over the past 450 million years, life on Earth has been devastated by 5 mass extinction events that are widely recognized by geologists. Now, an international team of researchers proposes adding a 6th mass extinction to the list. The team believes it has accumulated sufficient evidence to promote the Capitanian event to the rank of mass extinction about 262 million years ago during the Middle Permian period. That will sit along what they call the Big 5 mass extinction. So another mass extinction, you can go check that out at thesecretteachings.info. And a lot of these articles I don't always get into much detail about because I just didn't really think it was as significant. I just thought that it was an interesting news story. The next article I have, I actually already went through that one there. The next article I have is California Orange County CPS sued for kidnapping more than 5,000 children. The article says attorney Sean McMillan is continuing his fight against the corrupt Child and Protective Services in California and has now filed a class action lawsuit against Orange County, California for allegedly seizing more than 5,000 children in state-sponsored kidnappings. This follows his December 2014 class action lawsuit against CPS in Riverside County in California, which is also accused of kidnapping thousands of children without cause. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been going on for a long time. These kids are used in sacrificial rituals. These children are taken, they are used in snuff films. These children are taken and sold into sexual slavery. And I'm telling you what, if you're just listening to me right now and you think, oh, he's off his rocker, he doesn't know what he's talking about, the CPS is there to protect kids from abusive parents. These children here were taken from parents without a warrant. These children were taken from parents who have done little to nothing to their children. And the state takes them away in the middle of the night in some cases. We're talking right now about the Nazi Lebensborn program. What we're talking about right now is the movement and the abuse and the kidnapping of children in Chile, in Argentina during the Dirty Wars. We're talking about children that have been trafficked by the Catholic Church to the tune of $20 billion plus in the last couple of years just in South America alone. A multi-mega billion-dollar industry, the trafficking of children, the taking of children. You know, you've got the feminist movement created to separate men and women, to break down the relationships of men and women in this type of social warfare. Children taken from their parents, parents torn apart. so that the parents become these two pawns to be played against each other. This is sick shit, is what this is. You people like, what's his name, Boris something, who's the mayor of London, says we should take kids from their parents if their parents have a different religious or, not religious, political opinion outside of the normal views. Yes, go ahead and try. Take my kids because I have a different political opinion than you. If one of these pieces of shit came to my door, I would blow them into my neighbor's house. I can guarantee you that. The CPS, this group with the TSA, these pedophiles, and these corrupt pieces of garbage are lower than dirt. You talk about wanting to abolish certain governmental organizations. How about we abolish the CPS? How about we dismantle the religious institutions in this country who get away with more child abuse than any parent in this country? You could combine all the parents in this country who physically abuse their children, and it wouldn't put a dent in the amount of abuse that goes on within the churches and within the orphanages, and in with especially within a lot of these a lot of younger children, like really young toddlers, in these daycare centers. Remember the ones in California where there's like this underground network where children were taken and abused? Orphanages, mental homes, parents who didn't do anything to their kids are still taken from them. This is some sick stuff, ladies and gentlemen. And I'll tell you what, there's very few people that even want to acknowledge that it exists. But if you know about this and you don't do anything about it, you're just as guilty as the people that are perpetuating these crimes. I didn't say that you have to run out and you have to go and attack a CPS agent. That's not at all what I'm saying. And I'm not bringing about this to scare anybody or to get people to be on my side. I'm saying, look, this is what's happening. It's even been acknowledged by the mainstream news now. We fought so long to get people to be aware of high fructose corn syrup and hormones, GMOs, and now it's coming to fruition. These companies are removing them from their food. That's a victory. Now we're trying to fight to get people to be aware of the child abuse that happens in this country and around the world, not just by parents, but by the very agencies that are established to protect children. They're really the ones that are causing the problems. And this social engineering crap, separating the mom and the dad. The mom is becoming this ward of the state, and the child is taken and sold, or the child is taken and put on just an enormous amount of drugs, so they're just this brain-dead walking zombie that wouldn't even recognize their parents if their parents were put back, or they were put back into their parents' care. I have another article here from abc.net. Former Ballarat orphanage grounds dug up as police investigate allegations of buried children's remains. Police are digging up the grounds of a former Ballarat orphanage, just like I just said. Orphanages are a huge hotbed for this, and search for the remains of children. Police began the search just a couple of days ago. I think that this was actually from mid-April. I forgot about this article, but I wanted to bring it up today because of the California Orange County story we just talked about. And it said that the investigation started at 200 Victoria Street, which was once home to the Ballarat Orphanage, the Ballarat Children's Homes, and finally Damascus College. The site was sold to developers in 2011 who applied to have it rezoned for commercial and mixed use. And now they're excavating the grounds to find the remains of children who were buried from the orphanage and the children's homes. These orphanages, these children's homes, these daycare centers, and these CPS scumbags, this is like one of the circles of hell existing on earth. The people that do this are, there's not even a word for them. It's below the line of dirt, trash, filth, garbage. And whatever they do to these children, they need to have the same thing done to them right before we look them in the eye and we put the needle in, and that's the end of it. Talk about violence, and we need no more violence, no more violence, no more violence. Well, they'll tell you what, these people, this is beyond violence and beyond a more moral or ethical discussion. The people that kidnap and the people that molest, rape, murder children for these purposes, we need to get real creative with their punishments, I can tell you that. Here's the next article I have. I've got two left. AOL.com. Commission approves policy for Los Angeles Police Department to, I guess, have these body cameras. This comes from AOL.com and Reuters. It says the Los Angeles Police Commission approved a policy clearing the way for the widespread use of body cameras by patrol officers in the second largest U.S. city as tensions rise in the United States over police use of force incidences. Mayor Eric Garcetti said in December the city would equip 7,000 Los Angeles Police Department officers with the devices over the next 2 years to capture their day-to-day interactions with civilians. Oh, well, I think, it's a good idea to some extent, but are they going to keep the cameras on when they pull Rodney King out of the car and beat the shit out of him again? Are they going to keep the cameras on when they go after Christopher Dorner and they burn him down? They burn the cabin down that he's in? Are they going to keep the cameras on when they shoot 2 Hispanic women in a pickup truck because they thought it looked like Christopher Dorner's truck? Are they going to keep the cameras on when they bust into some random house in the ghetto and they shoot some black kid and then they say, oops, we had the wrong house, you can pay for his funeral? Are they going to turn the cameras off? Are they going to have the cameras on, rather, when they walk down a neighborhood street and a dog barks at them and they just open fire on the dog because they can? Are they going to have these cameras on when they pull a kid over because he gave the cops the middle finger, something that's not illegal? Are they going to have the cameras on when they just pull some random old guy out of his house and beat the hell out of him because, oops, we had the wrong house, he must have been smoking weed? Are they going to turn the cameras off then, or are they going to have them on? That's what I want to know. Are they just going to malfunction like they did when Lady Diana died in Paris? Are they just going to malfunction or be confiscated like they were during 9/11 in Washington, D.C.? All this is, I went to a hockey game the other night. It was an ECHL game, a minor league game, and I walk into the stadium. It's much different than an NHL game, which I'm used to going to. And I walk in, and the stadium, there's like 5,000 people there, which is like the lower bowl when I go to Tampa. And I walk in, and there's 2 guys standing there, and they're going through people's bags, right? And I thought they were going to open my bag up, and they were actually going to go through it, which still doesn't do anything because I could have a gun in my back pocket. And I walk in, all the guy did was he just squeezed the bag with his hand. He said, "Okay, you're good." And I know it's for show, but that's all this is. It's just for show. It makes people feel better. I'm not against the cameras. But just wait and see. When something happens, it'll be, well, the camera was smashed, the camera was lost, the person that the cop beat the hell out of, he ripped the camera off and smashed it, or it got water damage because it was raining, or there's too much footage, they didn't have enough to back it up, and then, they lost the footage of what happened, there was interference and static, the audio went out. That's all that you're going to hear. It's just going to be made-up crap. I guarantee it. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to come up with that. That's just how it is. The last article I have here is from ABC News, and there's no reason to really get into it, but I just thought it was interesting, talking about Sudan's pyramids, and the article says Sudan's pyramids, nearly as grand as Egypt's, go unvisited. The pyramids in Sudan at Meroe, M-E-R-O-E, Meroe, some 200 kilometers north of Sudan's capital, Khartoum, are rarely visited despite being a UNESCO World Heritage Site like those in Egypt. So there's a lot of reasons people, I guess, don't go and visit these, but just once again, so we are quite aware, there are pyramids all over the world, not just in Egypt, not just in Sudan, not just in China, not just in Japan, not just in South America, not just in North America, not just in Canada and the Arctic, not just off the coast of Florida and the ocean. They're all over the globe, ladies and gentlemen. These pyramids are everywhere. I think they speak to us, and what they say is that they are part of some ancient civilization, perhaps having contact with, I don't know, extraterrestrials, some type of advanced being, but they obviously had some form of advanced written language and way to communicate, and that's just another part in the vast puzzle that we are trying to put together here at the Secret Teachings, and I know other shows on the L&M Radio Network as well. I am your host, Ryan Gable. When we come back here in just a few minutes, we'll be joined by the director of the Farsight Institute. We'll be talking about remote viewing Cydonia and Mars, where, ironically, there are some pyramid formations. We'll talk to Courtney Brown about that and much more coming up here in just a few minutes. Our website, www.thesecretteachings.info. My email, rdgable@yahoo.com. Please help support the show by donating at thesecretteachings.info. Any donations over $15 and I'll send you a PDF of The Grand Illusion, Slaves to Perception, or you could simply just go and purchase the book. But anyway, all of that, ways to donate, past episodes, and the top news at thesecretteachings.info, rdgable@yahoo.com. rdgable@yahoo.com is my personal email. Don't be afraid to email me, and let's have a conversation about things you did or didn't like about The Secret Teachings, maybe music you'd like to send me to play on the show. I'd be happy to do so. We'll be back in just a few minutes with Courtney Brown. Stay tuned.
People who question the official version of events are usually labeled with the term conspiracy theorist, since this term is associated with paranoia and insanity. The person's questions are immediately dismissed as the rantings of someone who has gone mad, and using the ad hominem argument by immediately attacking the person rather than addressing their question, no matter how seemingly insane it may at first sound, a preconceived, often repeated storyline is allowed to exist and masquerade as absolute truth. If you train the masses to laugh at what they don't understand and to dismiss it as nonsense, then you have essentially eliminated free thought and critical thinking with little to no physical force. By setting the standards for what is possible or not, by what is apparently right or wrong, you are able to engineer an entire group of people and thus influence their choices and lifestyles to fit the corporate, political, socio-economic agenda of the real men behind the curtain. This has been an alternative fact brought to you by The Secret Teachings.
To hide the truth, once you know it, makes you think that you are better than everyone else. It makes you into the type of person who says, "Ooh, I have a secret," but you're not ready to hear it yet. However, for $39.95, I'll let you in on the secret. You'll lead the people to the promised land for the cheap price of 3 easy payments of 1/3 of their soul apiece.
At The Secret Teachings, we are not a part of any group, label, and we do not attempt to fearmonger. Some of the topics we discuss may seem scary, so I advise you not to be afraid, but to be informed as we discuss current events and ancient history, astrotheology and symbolism, the paranormal and the occult, the esoteric, health, and much more. I am not here to tell you that what I say is truth, but to allow you to decide for yourself based on the evidence presented and the dots connected. Information is not negative. It is how you view it that determines the dimensional characteristics of either dual aspect of negativity or positivity. Try as you might, but no amount of disinformation, propaganda, rhetoric, or trolling will change the truth. The truth is the truth, regardless if the masses accept it as is, or if it is accepted by only 1 out of billions. It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. For more information on airtimes and free downloads of past episodes of The Secret Teachings, you can visit www.thesecretteachings.info. That's thesecretteachings.info.
You're listening to The Secret Teachings. For more information, you can visit thesecretteachings.info, where you can find a full list of downloadable episodes, top news articles, links to our Facebook page, and ways to catch the show no matter where you're located. For questions, comments, or requests, you can email us at rdgable, that's rdgable@yahoo.com. Stay tuned.
welcome back to The Secret Teachings. I'm your host, Ryan Gable. Our website, www.thesecretteachings.info. That's thesecretteachings.info. On the website, you'll find a full list of all of our past episodes that you can download or stream for free. You'll also find a list of all of the news articles that we discussed in the previous hours of today's episode. On the show today, as I mentioned, we have the director of the Farsight Institute, remote viewing. We're going to be talking about Cydonia and Mars, and the director of the Farsight Institute, Courtney Brown, will be joining us here in just a moment. We'll give him a call. Also on the line with me, I have the host of Open Eyes Radio, Ira Robinson, with me once more. Ira, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for having me here today. I'm looking forward so much to this conversation.
Yeah, I am too. I've been looking forward to getting Courtney on my show since I had him on the last frequency about 6 months ago. And I had actually, his name was written down with a bunch of other names, but I was telling a story at the beginning of the show today how I got these 2 emails from 2 listeners on different days about how I should get this guy on because of this cool study they've done on remote viewing about Mars. And this was all taking place at the same time I was reading a book on the subject of monuments on Mars and things like that. And then I was also talking to Kevin Annett, the host of Radio Free Canada, where I co-host every Sunday, and he was talking to me about remote viewing. So all of these things sort of came together at the same time, and I thought, you know what, it's time to contact this guy, get him on the show. There's something that needs to be talked about. Before we call Courtney Brown here and get him on the Secret Teachings, there's one little thing I wanted to talk to you about just for a quick second here, Ira, and that is I looked up some statistics about Mars, and I was reading about how since 1999, in the 1990s, 16 of 23 of the U.S. probes that we've sent, of the probes from the United States that we've sent to Mars, have completely failed. We've lost communications, they've exploded, they've just died. Since 2005, over half of more than 40 international missions to Mars since the 1960s have crashed, exploded, or were lost. The only ones that made it that are well known about are Pathfinder, the 2 Viking missions, and the twin robotic explorers. What do you think about that? Do you think that there's something more sinister at foot, if you will? Do you think that there's something going on here? Do you think that maybe something's interfering with them? Because it's really the ones that are targeting to take pictures of Mars, to investigate the Martian surface. It seems to be that a lot of problems, mistakes, perhaps sabotage tend to happen when we deal with that region of space.
You're right. It does call into question the efficacy of the programs to begin with, whether or not it's an issue with, okay, well, these are just failing just because we're inept, basically. That is one possibility. But the other possibility, and I think the actual more likely one, is that either something is happening there on Mars where there are either entities or whatever that are trying to say, we don't want you looking at us, quit looking in our windows here, people,
That's what it's felt like to me, that there's something there. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's either that or it's something like with the field, the electromagnetic field perhaps around Mars is preventing these type of mechanical or electrical probes from finding anything out, whether that was actually in place by somebody putting it there as a way of protection or just through accident of evolution, basically. I don't know, but definitely something is happening there.
Yep. I mean, it could be an assortment of different things. The one thing about Mars that always really fascinated me as a kid was the area of Cydonia with the kind of like pyramid structures. Of course, we hear about the face on Mars. And when I was watching the new video that Courtney Brown had released about the remote viewing, he was talking about how the face on Mars, when he sees it, he sees something a little bit different. And I've always believed this, too, for the most part, that the face on Mars, at least what's portrayed to the public, is this distraction, this concept that's been pushed to the people, kind of like Roswell. They say, look, we recovered a UFO. Actually, no, we didn't. So people start thinking, well, look, they lied to us. They're covering something up. It must be that UFO. And they do the same thing on Mars. They say, look at this face on Mars. And people say it's a face. There's a colony. There's a species existing on Mars. It's past civilizations. And then NASA says, no, it's not a face. And then people think, well, they hid it from us. They must be lying to us about it. Let's go investigate this face. when in reality, the face, the Roswell crash, these are distractions from something much larger.
Yes, I am in total agreement with that. Actually, it's something that I've thought myself over the years, that we know for a fact that a lot of times the governments, every government, whether it's the United States, European, whatever it may be, the governments don't tell the people the truth in any way, shape, or form. And if they're releasing information saying, well, this exists, oh wait, no, it doesn't, you have to call into question the very fabric of the thing to begin with. We know that there are so many distractions that are put into place: misinformation, disinformation, whistleblowers that come out that are from the CIA and all of this kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
How much of a possibility is it? And I think that it is a very likely one, that a lot of these people that come out of these agencies and say, well, we know this information, here you go, those people are still tied to their past. They're still tied to their agencies that they came from. They may very well still be working for them, just in a different way at that point.
That's right. Once a CIA agent, always a CIA agent.
Yeah,
I guess.
you can't trust what they have to say.
That's right. Our guest today, Courtney Brown. We're going to get into a little bit about Cydonia and Mars. Courtney Brown is a mathematician and social scientist who teaches in the Department of Political Science at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. Courtney Brown received his Ph.D. degree from Washington University, St. Louis in 1982 in political science with an emphasis on mathematical modeling. He is the director and founder of the Farsight Institute, a nonprofit research and educational organization dedicated to the study of a phenomenon of non-local consciousness known as remote viewing. Their website is farsight.org. It is farsight.org. They also have two other websites, CourtneyBrown.com and FarsightPresentations.com. Let's go ahead and bring Courtney Brown on to the Secret Teachings, if our Skype works today, because the last time we recorded, Ira, we had some issues because we were talking about free energy, I think.
Yes, yes, indeed.
Let's see what happens here. And we are dialing. I'm having a deja vu right now, by the way.
Gotta love those.
Yeah, you never know what that is.
Or the opposite, the Vujade, the experience of never having experienced this before.
I have those every day. And Courtney, are you with us? Didn't look like it connected. Let me try again here. This Skype thing, every time they update this, there's always another issue, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That I try to avoid updating it as much as I can.
I don't know what the problem is. I think that this only happens when we do really important interviews like this on remote viewing. I've had some really strange occurrences in the last couple of days, I'll tell you that. Courtney, are you with us on the Secret Teachings?
I am here.
Hey, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Ryan. I want to thank you so much for inviting me on.
Absolutely. I'm also here with my guest host, Ira Robinson. He's very interested in remote viewing. I think he's done a little himself as well. Isn't that right, Ira?
I have indeed. I've experimented with it quite a bit over the years, and I'm so grateful to be able to talk to you, Courtney, and hear your salient thoughts on the whole subject.
Hey, Ira, it's great to speak with you.
I just wanted to make sure that we've got everything right. Farsight.org is the website.
That's right.
All right.
That's right. FARSIGHT.
Perfect. And you also have farsightpresentations.com and CourtneyBrown.com links to go check out your work and you a little bit on your biography. And maybe we can actually start with that. Give me a little bit of a background on you. Who is Courtney Brown and what you're trying to accomplish with this research?
Sure. Well, I am a university professor at a major university, but I don't do any of the remote viewing research at the university. At the university, I teach mathematics in a social science program, usually statistics and differential equations, things like that. But the remote viewing research I do at the Farsight Institute. That's FARSIGHT.org, O-R-G, and it's like seeingfar.org. And that is the largest venue. Actually, I can say it's the largest, biggest, and best because it's the only venue where you can get these full-blown public projects on remote viewing, as it is done using procedures, methodologies that were derived by the U.S. military and used actively for espionage purposes, or methodologies that are derivative of those procedures. So, we're the only show in town where this happens. There's a lot of people talking about doing remote viewing, but in terms of seeing it in action, we're it.
So you guys are really the only institute that is researching this phenomenon.
Well, you have other people researching it, other individuals researching it, but we're the only one where these full-blown projects using the best remote viewers on the planet Earth are done so that the public can see it. And so you have other people doing it, but they do it in a very different way. There are thousands of people who have written articles about remote viewing, but those are always like research done behind closed doors, and it's usually dealing with untrained college kids who are told how to remote view for 15 minutes, and then they're looking for statistically significant results, which they often find. But these procedures are, to be masterful of them, these procedures really take years of dedicated practice. It's probably, in order to get world-class good, like the remote viewers that we work with are, it's very much like Lang Lang playing the piano in Carnegie Hall. Anybody can play the piano, and you can make noise. You can demonstrate that the piano does, in fact, play music, and you can do things with it. But it's hard to play the piano. And if you really want to get good, like Lang Lang, where everything just sort of flows in playing Carnegie Hall, that took a lot of effort and a lot of time and a huge amount of practice. And that's what remote viewing is like. If this was really easy to do, we wouldn't be having shows about this. We wouldn't be talking about this as an ooh-ah phenomenon. If it was really easy to do, everybody would already know it, like breathing. Do you have to have a show on how to breathe? Everybody knows how to breathe. Well, remote viewing, you can get intuitions, but to get them so that they're highly structured, spot on every time, and that the intuitions and the descriptions of these things called targets are so perfect that it's like they were there with their own eyes. Remember, remote viewing is a mental process for perceiving across time and space, an apparent complete violation of the laws of physics as they were taught at the university, which is a real joke at the university level, because the laws of physics, the fundamental paradigms of quantum mechanics and relativistic physics, those are the billboards of physics taught in universities worldwide, are over 100 years old. Those fundamentals haven't changed a dime for over 100 years. So you know they're wrong. Science never stays still just for stuff like that. Now, the details have changed. I'm a mathematician, so I really appreciate the improvements and the advances that have been done mathematically with regard to quantum mechanics and relativistic physics. But, despite the fact that we know some of the details much better, we do quantum computing now. We have merged the relativity realm, which used to be just in the macro big realm like you and I, with the quantum realm to produce what's called a standard model. But despite all those sort of finesses, those are details around the edges. The big fundamentals haven't changed for way over 100 years. And so, you're really talking about a revolution, not just in social sciences, archaeological revolution. I mean, you're not talking about just sort of applied revolutions, but revolutions in the way of thought with regard to the very basic fundamentals of physics. Now, we do have a very good idea of the physics of remote viewing, how it actually does work. And great advances have been made, but they're peripheral in the physics realm right now. They were originally developed by a physicist named Hugh Everett, who got his PhD under John Wheeler at Princeton, and his dissertation in 1957 was widely laughed at and scoffed at in his day, but he was the one who came up with the idea of the other worlds, or parallel universes, because of a frequency-based interpretation of the universe. And everyone said, no, we're solid, everything's here. I mean, I see you, you see me, we're obviously pieces of rock, that type of stuff. And it was Hugh Everett that said, no, there's no such thing as that. All you have is frequencies. And that gave birth to the other worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. And currently, I understand it's approximately 18% of mainstream physicists now adopt the other world interpretation of quantum mechanics as being correct, which means that 82% are still stuck with the old Copenhagen model, which basically means that those ones are older, and we're waiting for them to retire and die off and replace by the other world's, new guys.
By this younger generation that's coming about.
That's exactly right, and it takes time. But the old standard model of quantum mechanics and the relativistic ideas that there's only a single version of us and we're solid in a solid universe, and thus there cannot be any other universes, and we must obey the laws of relativity. You cannot send information backward and forward in time, perceptions or things or anything else. Those things are just as obsolete as a club is with regard to a caveman. I mean, They're just not true, and there's plenty of data indicating that those things are routinely violated, but physicists have a myopic view of life and simply do not look. They literally forbid the looking at data that violate those things. So we're just waiting for, and the minds are very stubborn. And I'm a university professor. I live with these people. So I know the minds are very closed. And so we just have to wait for generational replacement, which is something that Max Planck taught us, well over 100 years ago, around the turn of the century, the last century, that, big changes in science don't really happen because someone comes up with a new idea. What really happens is people are very stuck in the mud, and you have to wait for generational replacement with a group of people who are acclimatized to certain ideas, retire and die off, and are replaced by the new generation. But that doesn't really solve the problem, because that means that the new generation are stuck in the mud with regard to their ideas.
Yeah, that's right.
What's very, very interesting is how difficult it is for people to change their ideas once they are set in stone. That's the big issue with regard to extraterrestrial life, with regard to many of the projects we do at the Farsight Institute, with regard to remote viewing. It's not that people haven't come up with great ideas. It's that the current people are the same as the past people, which are people get stuck. And the real trick in helping this planet and changing the planet and saving humanity and doing all that good, cool, interesting stuff is trying to come up with a way, an angle to get around the psychology of mass belief systems. That's the real thing. It's not really an issue of discovering some new technical wizardry or discovering some new theory. The issue is a mass psychology of humans that is rigid as the Rock of Gibraltar, and we're trying to find ways to get around it. We're looking for elements of theater shock at this point. Really, it's not an issue of discovering things. We've discovered a zillion things. The issue is, how do you wake up a humanity that's comatose, or better yet, is like petrified rock?
Yeah, people are scared. They're fearful. Courtney, a lot of scientists nowadays, it seems, they do their investigations, if they're considered real scientists, I guess, and what they'll do is they'll find evidence to support a preconceived conclusion, and any evidence to the contrary they just wipe away as being nonsense.
That's exactly what happened. This is really a big deal in archaeological realms. For example, my son, who's just now graduating from with a degree in archaeology, he was out in the desert last summer talking to some archaeological graduate students and saying, well, what about these other archaeological things? Things that were discovered, like devices, hammers, things like that, buried in strata that were, millions of years old, clearly out of time and place. What about those things? There's apparently a huge record of stuff like that. And they looked at him straight in the face and said, if we even talk about that stuff, we are banned for life in the discipline. We can't get published. We can't get a job. Nothing works. So just be quiet.
That's
literally.
That's exactly what we were talking. Ira and I were talking about last week on another show. We were talking about how there are there is physical evidence and photographic evidence of footprints that have been found in coal seams that date back 12 million years, and they're footprints of a ribbed sole shoe. They're footprints that they're like a size 10 shoe that are found in the Gobi Desert. The Russians and the Chinese found this during a joint expedition a couple of decades ago. And scientists, archaeologists, they just, like you said, they write it off. And if they speak about it, then they're relieved from their field. I mean, it's just like doctors who talk about cancer cures. They can have their medical license stripped.
Yeah, actually, that's the same with, that's exactly the same. So, there's some really big time books that have come out recently, such as Forbidden Archaeology, that is a book. Let me see. The best way to think about the forbidden archaeology thing is, well, the author is Michael Cremo, Cremo. But the best way to think about it is that he's not a professional PhD archaeologist, but he was someone who was, like you and I, extremely wondering about why archaeology is not taking into account all of these deep findings of things that are anomalous, things that are literally buried in the ground that people dig up but that don't fit with the strata. And so he's an extremely intelligent man, and he wrote a book that is way better than a zillion books published by PhDs in any type of field, called Forbidden Archaeology. That was
Are you guys still there?
I am. I think we lost him.
I think we did too. Let me see if I can reconnect here. Now
again, the funny timing of the subjects that get talked about. You see,
that's how it always works. Courtney, are you still with us? Yeah, now my computer's all messed up here. I'm telling you what, Ira, this is not. I'm not making this up. There's something weird. This happens every single time we do something like this. My Skype
it sure does.
My Skype just completely shut off on me, and my internet just restarted itself.
Oh, good God.
So I'm not sure what that is. I think Courtney's calling us back right now. Let's go ahead and accept this.
Okay.
And it just kicked him off again. I'll tell you what, man. This is like, you know, you people that are doing this, do you have to make it this blatant? Really? Come on.
Yeah, I just saw in his message he said that he is here.
Okay.
Yeah, there you are.
I can hear you. My internet just restarted and my Skype turned off completely on me when we started talking about the forbidden archaeology.
Oh, okay.
Every time certain subjects come up, man, it always ends up happening.
But go ahead.
Are we on now?
Yeah, we're still on. Just go ahead and you were talking about the forbidden archaeology, Michael Cremo's book. If you wanted to go ahead and finish up what your comments were about that.
Sure. Well, Michael Cremo wrote a huge book. I mean, he was extremely well-versed in this subject. And it's like 3.5 inches thick. And it was extremely well documented in terms of describing case after case after case after case. And that book is, you know, is better than a zillion books that are used at the universities for coursework. But it's forbidden at the in the coursework. It's not used as a coursework for any university. Yet, because it shows anomalous evidence that the basic storyline taught in anthropology and archaeology is incorrect. But you know, that type of a book with the level of detail and the level of documentation is sort of rare, and you know, that's what we're dealing with subjects like remote viewing and extraterrestrial life. It's not that the findings are absent. It's that the recognition in mainstream is absent.
That is very true, Courtney.
Yeah. One of the things that I appreciate about the work that you guys do there at the Farsight Institute is that you do things as scientifically relevant as you possibly can get. You know, even though it is what people would consider to be like a woo-woo kind of a subject, to the mainstream thinking, you know, to those of us who are, you know, on the outside of things, you know, we understand that these things really are real, that there is no doubt in our minds whatsoever that this stuff works. But the way that you do things and present things to people, I think, does a really good service because you have presented them in these scientifically relevant ways as possible.
Yeah,
I definitely like that.
And we basically ignore the element of whether people are ready for it.
Yes.
So when I first came out with my first book, now I'm normally the chief investigator of these projects. I don't do the remote viewing for these projects. For this latest project, which just came out, which is on Mars, that was, you know, the remote viewers for that are the two best remote viewers on the planet Earth right now. Dick Galgeier out in Hawaii using the Hawaii Remote Viewer Guild methods, and then Daz Smith, who's in Britain using CRV or controlled remote viewing. The HRVG or Hawaii Remote Viewing Guild methods that Dick Algar uses were taught to him by Glenn Wheaton, who came out of Special Forces Intelligence, and the CRV methods, controlled remote viewing, that are used by Daz Smith, those procedures came out of Defense Intelligence Agency in an official program. The HRVG procedures were not an official. They didn't come out of an official program within the military. They came out of what was best described as a movement within the military that later became featured in the movie Men Who Stare at Goats, starring Jeff Bridges and George Clooney. But the DIA procedures, which is an official program, that was housed in Fort Meade, Maryland, and those are the procedures that Daz Smith uses. And so the pedigree of these people that work on our projects, they have huge published track records of remote viewing and project after project, published in peer-reviewed outlets, respected peer-reviewed outlets, and all of which is available on our website at farsight.org, FARSIGHT, like seeingfar.org, because we're a nonprofit. And this type of stuff is to die for. This type of stuff is really spectacular, but it doesn't mean that everyone in the world is jumping up and down because these results and these scientific studies are there, have been done. It's a matter of people getting used to it. But we stopped worrying about what other people are ready for two reasons. A, it's taking people a long time, and B, we wanted to have fun. We wanted to do these things. We didn't want to die and not have done these things. So it's like saying a joke that somebody doesn't get, and you sort of say a joke and it's really funny. You laugh and your best friend laughs, but your other best friend doesn't laugh. It just says like, well, why are you combining this and that? It like doesn't make sense. What do you hope to get out of that? And then you look at the person and you said, it was a joke, for gosh sakes. Don't you get it? You should be laughing. And it's nothing's wrong with the person. It's just that the person's mind may not be at the same spot where you're in.
Yeah, they don't have the point of reference, basically, that
exactly.
would acclimate them to that joke.
Exactly. So you can't do things in life based on your expectation of what other people are, how other people are going to react. For example, when I first came out with my first remote viewing book, that was when I first learned remote viewing myself, and I came up with a book on applied remote viewing, using it with regard to extraterrestrial life, and that was a bestseller in its day. And it's still available as a free PDF download from my personal website, which is CourtneyBrown.com, just my name, .com, in the speculative nonfiction realm area. And that was called Cosmic Voyage. And when I came out with Cosmic Voyage, I remember my agent, I was so happy with it. The publisher was so happy with it. It was selling so great. And I talked to somebody who was in the military, who was a military guy doing the remote viewing stuff out of the defense, out of the DIA program. And I said, well, what'd you think? And the guy said, well, I think it was a really stupid book. I think, you put in way too much. People aren't ready for it. It's just, you give them inch by inch, you don't give them the kitchen sink, and you just don't throw it all there. I mean, it's just like really ridiculous. And I said, wow, talk about, talk about a bad landing. And so I just sort of learned then, well, you never really learn. Your feelings always get hurt. But the point is, the lesson is, you can't do things based on what you think other people are going to say, based on how you think they're going to respond. That book turned out to be the bestseller of remote viewing, and that was the thing that started the whole field in remote viewing, meaning people became interested in remote viewing because of that book. I mean, the guy was dead wrong in terms of the public reaction, but the point is that the guy was dead right in terms of where his mind was. And so
it's like the idea of the publishing company that did not publish the Beatles originally because they said no one would be interested in it. It was the same kind of thought.
Exactly, but that doesn't mean the Beatles should have not done what they've done. You don't take the Beatles and then have them look at the publishing company and say, well, what do you think we should do? We'll do what you should do, what you think we should do. I mean, you know, by the way, that doesn't. It's not just the Beatles. I mean, that's
the same thing
Bob
happened
Dylan.
with George Lucas and Star Wars. They told him that that was a
Yes.
stupid idea.
Exactly. In fact, I use that in some of my classes at Emory to sort of tell people, to sort of bring to life the idea that you have to come up with new material if you constantly try to please people. Because my students at universities worldwide, not just my university, they're taught from high school to please. You're good Johnny, good Susie. Yep. You're supposed to please your parents. You're supposed to please your teachers. So they're trained to please. And when you leave college, if that's what you think life is all about, you're going to go into business or go into law and medicine. Your whole realm is going to be locked, like lockjaw, into trying to please people, having a happy customer. And the possibility of you actually doing something that is really thrilling in life, that you really enjoy, what happens to that? And so with George Lucas, he imagine, in fact, when I teach my students, I use the George Lucas example. I say, imagine having George Lucas before Star Wars describe what his movie concept was. And he goes and he tells somebody, well, I've got this idea of, like these really crazy alien people with all types of weird, interesting costumes and stuff like that, like in a bar, singing on music and playing music. And this guy that's this sort of jock type of guy comes in and he's flying this like space freighter that's hunted by the authorities, and like there's an evil empire, and the evil empire is chasing the good guys, and like they move things with their mind with the Force. And that's exactly what did happen to him. People laughed at him until he completed his vision, and he made his movie, and people then saw it. And apparently, the very first version of the movie was like 3 hours long, and there was like a 15-minute standing ovation at the end of it. Now, but this also happens with like Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan, the singer, Bob Dylan. It wasn't just the Beatles and Lucas. When Bob Dylan was first starting out, he was trying to be like, his own version of a Woody Guthrie type personality, singing in this nasally tone with a harmonica and a guitar. And everybody who saw him said, this is just crazy, until John Hammond came along. And Hammond was the one, he was a music exec, said, this is the next base thing. Now, for the longest time, Bob Dylan, for like the whole year that Hammond was really sort of pressing and saying, this is really great, people in the industry called Bob Dylan, and this is an exact quote, they called him Hammond's folly, meaning they thought this was just Hammond's crazy idea that was the stupidest thing in the world. And Hammond just said, this is going to be good. And then Bob Dylan started to come out with his albums. And then was history. I mean, everybody then... And, you never hear about these people afterwards. They never, like, fess up and say, yeah, I was a stupid jerk who thought it was going to be really ridiculous. They never... So when actually remote viewing becomes mainstream and the discussion of extraterrestrial life with respect to that becomes mainstream, you're never going to get these physicists coming back and saying, oh yeah, that was me. That was a roadblock and all of that stuff.
We were wrong.
They're never going to fess up or anything like that. People just move on. And so, with remote viewing and the discoveries that we have been made, they are where it's at right now. If people want to know what's happening, it's our public projects. That's the only venue that exists where these things are. And we don't really care that the mainstream science may be ignoring us. But I will say one thing. Nobody's laughing anymore. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, people were saying Courtney Brown is deluded, Farsight is just a joke, this is ridiculous. No one's doing that anymore. There's no public ridicule. Everyone's like in a waiting to exhale moment. They're like holding their breath. Because, you never bet against a smart guy who never backs down. And with regard to the stuff that we do, it's like one project after the next. And so these series of projects, right in the middle of doing the video for the second one, we've got 3 projects. Normally we don't touch the subject of extraterrestrial life because the remote viewers that I deal with, they're essentially prima donnas, and they're looking for sort of mainstream credibility, and they don't like the idea of combining remote viewing with extraterrestrial life because it's 2 esoteric topics together. They like dealing with just remote viewing by itself. But this is another situation where I don't take their expectations as my guidance in life. So, but nonetheless, for absolute years and years and years, I promise them I'll never give them extraterrestrial life type targets because, they don't like to do that. But that's a lie. I had to tell them that so that when I did extraterrestrial stuff, they would do it totally blind, meaning the remote viewing has to be done totally blind. They cannot know anything about the nature of the project or anything. And as soon as they pop themselves down on an extraterrestrial place, they're going to notice the gravity is different. They're going to notice the sun is different. They're going to notice it someplace else. So I had to convince them that it wasn't going to happen so that they wouldn't come to any conclusions, and they just keep on reporting what they perceive blind, doubting, having doubt in their conscious mind. That's the perfect way to do remote viewing, when the conscious mind is in total doubt. If the conscious mind comes to a conclusion, then you lose it. You lose the session, because then memory comes in and imagination comes in, and then the whole Star Wars stuff comes in. It just, so the conscious mind has to be duped when that happens. And I did that same thing with our 9/11 project, when we did a project on the 9/11 events. Now, these remote viewers are so good that when they see these things, they see them in real high resolution. I knew the very first target I gave them, they'd see the Twin Towers come down, and they'd know what it was. So for years, I told them, and on radio, we'll never touch the 9/11 stuff. And I came up with reasons like, oh no, the military guys are on our board of directors, which is true. We know that we're not supposed to deal with stuff like that. That's too sensitive. We're not going anywhere near there. And they bought it hook, line, and sinker. So when I thought the time was right, that's the target I gave them. And that was a tough one, because there was like 7 targets or 7 things that they were supposed to perceive, one after the other, stretched over some months. They had to be kept in doubt throughout the entire time, and it worked like a charm. So, that's this type of, working with these prima donnas who are that good, it takes a lot of effort to be able to get this type of work out of them so that they can do this stuff. Now, every once in a while, you come up with somebody who says, okay, now you're a certified liar, because we've certified that you, in fact, have lied on the radio about what you're going to do in the future projects. Well, I say, well, give me a break. I mean, you asked me a stupid question to begin with. What are we going to do on our future project? So I told you the truth. I can't do that project. I mean, so what am I? Yeah, give me a break. You don't know anything about the remote viewing phenomenon if you asked the question in the first place. So, and then the second thing is, what I did is no different than what a director does. For example, some great directors, well, there was one case where Audrey Hepburn was working in a movie and wasn't getting the emotions out that she was supposed to be getting out. This is when she was relatively new, but the director knew she could do it. And so in front of other people, she wasn't getting tears. The real tears were not coming out. So in front of other people, the director just started yelling at her and, just telling her, this is awful, you're doing a lousy job, knowing full well that she was great, but he wanted to get her to cry. And he just started, in front of other people, embarrassing her, and eventually tears started to come out, and she said, cut it. I mean, he said, all right, action, quick, now. And they got the tears.
I remember that story, yeah.
Yeah, and that they got the tears, it was realistic, and she won an Oscar.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was the beginning of Audrey Hepburn as a big superstar when that happened. Now, are you supposed to? What are you supposed to say? The director should be fired because he, dragged her through an emotional loop? Well, it's the same thing with remote viewing. It doesn't work if the remote viewers have any idea whatsoever about what they're assigned to perceive. It's got to be done blind.
Courtney,
so I've got to do whatever I can possibly do to make sure that they're caught unaware.
Well, teach me a little bit about how this process works, and let the listeners know you're the one that makes the decision on what the target will be, and the 2 remote viewers that you're using, they know nothing of the target. They're going into this blind, and they're not even in contact with one another, correct? And yet in the videos...
In fact, they're on the opposite ends of the planet. Daz Smith is in UK, and Dick Algar is in Hawaii, and during the project's data collection period, when they're doing the remote viewing, there's no connection, there's no communication between them. So they're not Skyping, they're not looking at each other, they're not even emailing each other. I mean, it's just dead. And
they're finding a lot of the same results as the other person. These
guys are so good. It's like carbon copies. These guys, these guys are so good that what one guy gets, the other guy gets. I mean, not like just a little bit overlap. I mean, it's like you can put one on top of the other. It's amazing stuff. But they also extend in different directions. So there are two types of remote viewing data. One is called verifiable, and verifiable data are stuff that you already know about the target. For example, the current project that we're talking about is about Mars, and that's the Cydonia region, the so-called face on Mars. Well, we've got some really good photographs of that supplied by NASA, and so we know what's there. We know it's a barren terrain. We know it's like a mountain. We know its diameter is, from corner to corner is about 3 kilometers. And we got some really good detail about the surface that we know the remote viewers have to get spot on. And that's what these remote viewers do. They get everything spot on. They get everything exact with regard to the verifiable stuff. Thus, they know about it. But then they start extending. I mean, they don't know what the limits are between verifiable and new data. So then they just start describing everything else that they see, and they fill in the entire backstory, stuff that you can't see in the photograph. So what our remote viewing projects always have is some major component that's verifiable so that you know they're describing the correct thing. And then it fills in with the rest of the story. Then those are the OMG moments when you're saying, oh my, so that's what's going on. And it fills in and everything makes sense. Now we know what the Cydonia so-called face on Mars was all about. We know how it ended. We know what's underneath the ground. We know the people that lived there, who built it, why they built it, what they were like. We know the whole backstory of that whole thing. But it all comes on the bedrock of knowing that the verifiable stuff, which is a huge element, is exactly correct. And Daz Smith and Dick Allgaier both got exactly the same verifiable stuff. And we're not talking about vague descriptions like wavy lines or a little dry here. We're talking spot on, very explicit, highly detailed descriptions of exactly what we know is at that target with respect to the picture. Really, totally unambiguous. That's what you get when you have these, better than military grade remote viewers. These are the best civilian remote viewers on the planet. So,
Ira and I both watched the Cydonia Mars video, and I watched the 9/11 one, too, the last time that we interviewed you. And it's really, really incredible stuff. I just thought that you might find this interesting. I got 2 emails in the past month before I contacted you asking me to talk about remote viewing, and somebody had sent me information for you, contact information. They said you should have Courtney Brown on your show. And I got another email a couple of days later from another listener who said the exact same thing. And I'm thinking, I remember Courtney Brown. I think I should contact him, get him on the show soon. And I was planning on doing it a little bit later, maybe in June or July of this year. And another guy contacted me who hosts, we co-host a radio show on Sundays together on a different topic. And he said, hey, how about this Sunday we talk about remote viewing? So I've got 3 different people all at the same time saying, let's talk about remote viewing. And at the same time, Courtney, I'm reading this book by a friend of mine who's written this 3-volume series about the idea of the evolution of man, where humans came from extraterrestrials. And he wrote a huge chapter on Mars, specifically talking about the Cydonia region on Mars. And then I contact you, you send me the information for your new video, I watched it, and you're talking about the same thing. For me, there's some type of synchronistic connection there, plus all of the technical issues I've had. This is the kind of proof for me that this information is very legitimate, and what you're doing is very on target with the truth of whatever you've uncovered in those remote viewing sessions about Cydonia on Mars. I don't know what you think about that.
I have to absolutely agree with Ryan on that as well. Yes, I feel that it's exactly the same way, too.
Well, in the beginning, the authorities, the military and so on, they were tasked with the intelligence groups. They were tasked, well, actually going back to the 1940s, they've been tasked with the issue of keeping this buttoned down, keeping this off the front pages, out of the mainstream. And typically that means entering and joining, disrupting UFO groups and things like that. And that typically means that when groups start to form, very often members will join who are supposed to be disruptive, and then they join and disrupt, and then other people stop participating because it's just a mess. And the whole idea is to keep these groups either small or inconsequential or highly disrupted. And that affected us in the beginning, in the 1990s, because that program, that element was still there. However, nothing like that is happening anymore. Nothing like that at all is going on with us. We are not being interfered with at all, technically, or with regard to personnel. So, and the big test for us was the 9/11 project, when we clearly showed remote viewing data in a huge project with two major documentaries, two movie documentaries that described all of the work, how the 9/11 thing was essentially an inside job, which some of your readers or listeners may be sort of rolling their eyes for, but they really have to see the data in order to understand it. And also the corroboration between the remote viewing data and the physical data, the anomalies on the ground, it was just absolutely perfect, and nothing is corroborated between the physical data on the ground, the anomalies, and the mainstream story about how the 9/11 thing actually happened. And so the so-called official story, some people call it the official conspiracy theory.
It really is an official conspiracy theory, and the people that promote it are truly paranoid more than people like us who ask questions.
Yeah, and so that was a real test for us to see when that was done, after the remote viewing was finished and the project and the targets were identified to the remote viewers, which were, again, Dick Algar and Daz Smith. Their first question was, are we going to be allowed to publish this? I mean, like, we explained exactly the whole thing, the whole backstory. Like in the past, we wouldn't have been allowed to publish it. Something would have happened to have disrupted. And I said to them, look, if we were going to be stopped, we would have been stopped before now, because we don't have any secrets with the military people. And so, they know everything we're doing, so we don't encrypt anything. We came out with that. And now the evidence, that by itself is, for people who know how intelligence people work, that is absolutely perfect evidence. I mean, you can say, if you can be as doubtful as you want, but if you know how military intelligence people work, evidence like that is absolutely 100% perfect in telling you that they're not disrupting us. And what that tells you is that with respect to the 9/11 stuff, but also with respect to the extraterrestrial life stuff, but let's stick with the 9/11 stuff just for a moment, that tells you that there's a huge fight going on, a war behind the scenes in the intelligence community itself. And that a huge chunk of the intelligence community is really, really royally ticked off that the 9/11 thing happened the way it did. And we're being allowed to publish, meaning that we can't do what we do unless somebody's protecting us. I mean, I know that for an absolute fact. Whether you in the old days, I could say we were being disrupted by authorities, and people could say, oh, you're paranoid, a conspiracy nut, and deluded and stuff like that. But now I'm saying the opposite. No, we're not being disrupted. So that's evidence that, that the authorities are okay with us coming out. Not all of the authorities,
just
but
some.
a good hefty chunk of them, ones with significant influence. Because I tell you, Ryan, Ira, nothing is happening to us. We are doing project after project after project. There is absolutely zero interference. And we're coming out, we have the highest quality video quality coming out with these projects. One thing after the next, no one's stopping us in terms of getting our information out to the public, in terms of new stuff. There's no internal intrigue. There's no people joining our group that are causing disruptions. None of that is happening. Our machines are not going down mysteriously. Look, let me tell you, this Skype conversation we're having right now, I know these military guys. They have capabilities that are way beyond anything you have ever fantasized about with respect to getting into computers or getting into buildings or getting into anything. There is no way to protect yourself from them. If your computer is on and not even connected to the internet, they have a way to get into the house and put something on that computer, and you will never know. I mean, but if it's connected to the internet, no matter what kind of anti-spywriting software you have, no matter what kind of antivirus software you have, no matter what kind of firewalls you have, it doesn't matter. They can get into it in the blink of an eye and do anything they want on that computer. So I'm telling you, so we have our policy is, well, let's not hide anything. We don't have any encryption going on. We have the standard stuff of, antivirus software and stuff but that doesn't bother them. And if they wanted to shut this conversation down, if they wanted to disrupt the machines, if they wanted to break into the house and take the machines out, it's a blink of an eye stuff. I mean, if they wanted the bank to end stuff, if they wanted me to be no longer a professor, I mean, it's a blink of an eye type of stuff. They can do that in a
Snap
second.
of the fingers.
They have very advanced capabilities for doing this type of thing. And anyone who says, "Oh, this is diluted, you can't do it," you're living in a fantasy realm. This is what these guys get paid. This is what these guys get paid to do. This is what their job is, to know how to do this stuff. And so if you're saying that they can't do this and that I'm living in a fantasy realm, you're saying that the U.S. military, which has a yearly budget that is bigger than all militaries of all other countries combined, added together, all at once, our military budget is bigger than that. And the biggest chunk of that, which is the hugest block of that, is black, meaning there is no accounting for it at all, meaning no one in Congress knows what it's spent on. There's no line item stuff. You're saying that all that money that is being spent on all that stuff that nobody has any accountability for is totally wasted. Well, what do you think they spend that money on? They if there's one thing that they're concerned about, it's getting information, being able to control things. And so when I tell you we're not being disrupted, that's very important piece of information. That means that a hefty chunk of those people are saying this is, they're humans like anyone else. They want the society to survive like anyone else. They see that they're invested in the future like anyone else. They have kids like anyone else. They want their kids to live in a better world. And they're allowing this stuff to happen now. So this is a really great time to be involved in remote viewing studies and to be involved in studies, especially connecting it with extraterrestrial life, because the way is cleared now. The way is cleared, and we can do our stuff. No one's disrupting. In fact, somebody out there must be fighting heavily behind the scenes to keep the road cleared before us. So that's why we're having this interview.
It's like they're giving tacit approval, basically, by them not doing anything. They're just saying,
yes.
Okay, well, you guys can go ahead and release it,
We're doing stuff by getting the information out that they're not allowed to do. For example, military people, military intelligence people, they're employees of agencies. So they're not allowed to come out and say, all right, we're going to now talk to you about extraterrestrial life and past civilizations on Mars and on Earth and things like that. They're not allowed to do stuff like that. The discovery of extraterrestrial life, the UFO phenomenon, the past civilizations on Mars, stuff like that, that has never been a scientific issue. People always say, oh, no, we have SETI, we're trying to discover signals from radio signals. Look, that's all a joke. Nothing has ever been a scientific issue with regard to any of that stuff. It's always been a political issue. It's always politics that drives it. No scientist is going to be allowed, no mainstream, money gathering and money collecting federal budget item agency such as NASA or SETI. Nobody is going to be allowed to publish their results and to say, we've discovered extraterrestrial life, and to make it certified, accepted, mainstream, without the political decision that it's time to do it. It's always been a political decision. It's never been a scientific decision.
That's right. That's actually something that we talked about a couple of days ago. I remember we were speaking with Eric Dollard, the free energy guy, and he was saying the same thing, that he doesn't get as much interference as much as he actually gets almost promoted in a sense by some of these agencies to talk about what he's talking about, to put out that information about free energy. I think, Courtney, you're saying the exact same thing when it comes to remote viewing. We're going to take a quick break here, and we'll come back. I wanted to get into a little bit about what you guys found in those remote viewing sessions for Cydonia on Mars, if that sounds good to you.
Sounds great.
Courtney Brown, our guest today, the director of the Farsight Institute. The website's CourtneyBrown.com, FarsightPresentations.com, and www.farsight, F-A-R-S-I-G-H-T, that's farsight.org. All of that information is also linked up on our website, www.thesecretteachings.info. I'm your host, Ryan Gable, here with my guest host, Ira Robinson. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
Protection of national security, obviously the government's need to obtain intelligence data, and the protection of civil liberties, particularly the sanctity of my home. You've got no right to come into my home.
The government's been in bed with the entire telecommunications industry since the 40s. They've infected everything. They get into your bank statements, your computer files, your email, listen to your phone calls. Every wire, every airwave. You're talking to your wife on the phone, you use the word bomb, president, Allah, any of 100 key words. The computer recognizes it, automatically records it, red flags it for analysis. That was 20 years ago.
Sooner or later, you have to bring in an element of persuasion, an element of getting people to consent to what is happening to them. We are in process of developing a whole series of techniques which will enable the controlling oligarchy to get people actually to love their servitude.
How can we so arrogantly believe that we are at the very cutting edge of human and social evolution? How can we truly understand ourselves when we dilute our very nature with distractions that only seem to entertain rather than educate the human brain and mind? If you wish to explore these concepts and much more, you can tune into The Secret Teachings, Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the L&M Radio Network. You can also download and listen to past episodes for free by visiting our website, www.thesecretteachings.info. Remember that the highest wisdom is silent fact, and that wisdom is not bestowed, it is achieved. Welcome back to The Secret Teachings. I am your host, Ryan Gable. Our website, www.thesecretteachings.info. If you log on to the website, you'll find a full list of all of our past episodes that you can download or stream for free under our Show Archive tab. You'll also find a top news tab with all of the news articles we discussed in the first hour of today's show. And if you're just joining us, we've been speaking with Courtney Brown. He's a mathematician and social scientist who teaches in the Department of Political Science at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. He is also the director and founder of the Farsight Institute. His website, CourtneyBrown.com, FarsightPresentations.com, and Farsight.org. And Farsight is spelled F-A-R-S-I-G-H-T, Farsight.org. It's also linked up at thesecretteachings.info. I'm also joined by my guest host today, Ira Robinson, who is a host on the L&M Radio Network, host of Open Eyes Radio, his website, openeyesnetwork.com, if you want to check out what he's got going on over there. So, guys, we've been talking a little bit about remote viewing. We've been talking, before we went to break, we were talking about different agencies that are somewhat divided Some of the people that work within these agencies kind of want the information that we're talking about to be released, so they allow the work of people like yourself, Courtney, to go about untouched and uninterrupted. And I kind of see the same thing that's been promoted as a type of propaganda. When we look at something like the face on Mars, for example, I think there's certain aspects of society, certain factions of the government, like when these images were first released from the Viking space probe, we hear this big promotion of NASA saying, look, there's a face on Mars, and then they kind of retract that and say, no, it's just lighting. And when they retract it, just like the Roswell incident or the Roswell crash, the military says they have a flying disc, and then they quickly retract it. It gets people to feel very paranoid about the government, if you will. It makes them think that they're being lied to. And in that case, their attention is really diverted. So when they think that they're being lied to by these institutions, by these government officials, they jump to the true, I guess you could say, conspiracy, but really it's the propagandizing motive that's been pushed that, hey, when you look at Mars, you're looking for the face. And in reality, their attention's being diverted from what else exists there. And the same thing is true for incidences such as Roswell or the paranoia that we have, thinking that we're always being monitored and watched. And in one way, we really are, but it doesn't mean that somebody's always sitting down at the computer monitoring everything you do as an individual. It's a lot different than that. So our attention is constantly diverted. And in the introduction to your Cydonia Mars remote viewing video, Courtney, you were talking about the face on Mars and how you didn't see a face. You actually saw parallel lines. You saw 90-degree right angles. How much of what I said kind of plays into what you were talking about in the last segment, and then carry that over into Cydonia and Mars, the new remote viewing video you have?
Well, actually, that's great. There's a couple things. You really talked about the agency people, the governmental people, and then you also talked about the magic show that was done with regard to distracting the public. So let me deal with the agency people first. The best way to think about how the government is not as a monolithic thing that is out to repress people, but it's much more like the TV show, the television show. What is that television show they called? The Truth is Out There with
the X-Files.
X-Files. The X-Files, yeah. Like it's much like the X-Files, where there's people inside the government, so-called the deep throat guy in X-Files, who wanted the information out and helped the Fox Mulder get to, to have leads to go after these things. And that's basically what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a very multifaceted organization. The government is huge. And there's people on both sides. The people who wanted to crush the X-Files and Fox Mulder's and Scully's attempts to find out the truth, and other people who wanted to bring light. They knew that there had to be a balance between bringing the information out and suppressing the information, that just bringing the information out all by itself without some type of resistance is unrealistic. On the other hand, if you constantly have the resistance, you have the crushing of a civilization. You have the totalitarian control of a civilization, and that lack of freedom is huge with respect to the implications it has on our future. So, that's what we're really dealing with. So when we say that there are people protecting us, it's just sort of the norm. By the way, you should understand that everything coming out of Hollywood that deals with the intelligence community, the military, everything is vetted. Everything goes through a process where they approve and they change the scripts. They do so. The X-Files could not have been done without that. No. Now there are probably people in your audience saying, "How does he know that?" But it's not a secret. We actually we know the names of the people who actually do the vetting. It's not a government secret that these people, after they retire, they become public. And the main guy who did the vetting for every single Hollywood TV show and blockbuster movie over the past 25 years, retired, actually 26 years, because he retired about 3 years ago. After that, he came out with a book that was officially sanctioned by the government, and he went on talk radio describing his activities and what he did and the whole thing. So, and nobody in the media challenged that. It was a...
I remember seeing that in the media, and he was talking to reporters, and they were talking about how if the military, for example, relinquishes, a military ship or a helicopter or military equipment to be used in a movie, the Pentagon has to approve that script before they're able to have access to that technology.
Yeah. That is now no longer in dispute.
Well, you take an example of the movie Mission to Mars, which had complete input from NASA along with it, and the thought that I had when I was watching that movie, for instance, was, well, this was done in collaboration with NASA in a lot of different ways. How much of this type of thing actually was a reality, you see?
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. So anyway, so that type of stuff is the reality of sort of what goes on, and but and again, these people who do the vetting, they're not public when they do the vetting. They work for the intelligence community, and they're not public when they do it. But when it's over, it has become known, and it has become known in a major, officially sanctioned way, with radio interviews and so on, and it's not disputed in the military. I mean, it's not disputed in the media that this in fact was their job. So the X-Files was an officially sanctioned show, meaning there were people that actually wanted that story to come out as it came out. It gave a lot of insight into the inner workings of the intelligence community. Well, the stuff that we're dealing with right now was like that. So let's now to the Cydonia thing. Now, the big website to go to, since a lot of people can have difficulty remembering all the websites, the big one to go to is farsight.org, FARSIGHT, like seeing far.org, ORG, because we're a nonprofit. That's the go-to place to start. And the big banner right on the top is the remote viewing Cydonia March, which is our recent thing. If I can give one plug, though, that's very important. We are a nonprofit, and we do not have a way to tell people what we are doing. So, by advertising. We don't buy advertisements, any advertisements. So if you could click on the top link in the navigation bar that says subscribe to our free newsletter. We never give out the email addresses to anyone, ever, period. Ever, and we have a weekly newsletter that comes out that even has a comic, a pretty well-received comic these days. It's always had a comic, it's a nice newsletter to get once a week, and there's no it doesn't have like advertising on it or anything. So it's the only way we have to tell people what we're doing. So if you can just put your email address in there, there's no spam because we never give out the email addresses. And it's just a once-a-week newsletter, and that's the only way we had to let you know what we're doing. Anyway, if you click on the Cydonia March thing, you can actually see the NASA photographs that this is about. Now, when the photographs originally came out from the Viking space probes, that did sort of look like a face. But when it got a little closer, there was questions about whether NASA was playing with the light, whether they were trying to cover up facial characteristics. Well, people can still debate whether it's a face or not, but I was never in the face ballpark. I mean, it's because it's 3 kilometers from corner to corner, 3 kilometers big. That's huge. I mean, if you think of a political decision to build something, why in the world are you going to build a face pointing up towards the sky? You're going to be thinking about things that would get your followers to support you while you were in power. And having something pointing up to the sky that's that big, that's not like the Washington Monument. That's not like the Lincoln Memorial. I mean, things that people can see that can get you, adoration, establish some type of mystique about you. So this idea of a face pointing up, I just never bought into it. Although I'm not saying it wasn't that, but we have no evidence that it is that. But what was really going on with it was all of the circus about the face. And then when NASA, by the way, which was completely ignored by mainstream media, and then when NASA came out with the Mariner photos that were higher resolution. Actually, they were the Mars observer photos and things, the orbiter and so on. When they came out with the later photos of it, and they said, see, it's not a face, mainstream media did publish that. They put it all over the place. And so when that happened, everyone was saying, breathing a sigh of relief, saying, oh, my gosh, at least, thanks goodness, there's no face. See, there's no face. So they put that all over the place. And it was just like a magician, because what happens is a magician will do something with the right hand to distract you so that you're not looking at what the left hand is doing. So by having this photograph come out saying, look, it's not a face, it's not a face, it's not a face, what they were doing is getting everybody to focus on whether there was a face, and what they were really doing was getting everybody to not notice that there were perfect parallel and perpendicular lines on the photograph, plus a perfect corner that was a better corner than you have in any of your rooms in your house, plus a perfect semicircle on the other end, meaning it had a perimeter, and it was clearly artificial. No erosion process makes perfectly parallel and perfectly perpendicular lines, plus a semicircle. So that was what really keyed me. I saw that. I said, I'm not even thinking about the face, but those lines are, absolute evidence of civilization activity. Somebody built something there. So I was always wondering about what it was. I never bought into the idea of the face, but I had no idea what it really was. So finally, I had an opportunity where these remote viewers were convinced we'd never do something about extraterrestrial life. And I said, now's the time to do it. They seem as convinced as they're ever going to be convinced. So I threw it at them at that moment. And I actually threw it in with a bunch of other targets, one for Iapetus and the other on the Phoenix Lights. We're working on the Iapetus video now, and the Phoenix Lights one will come out after that. So the Iapetus video will actually come out in about 3 weeks. Phoenix Lights will come out sometime during the summer. We know the complete backstory on all of these things. And so I put them all into one project because I knew the remote viewers might be a little ticked off that I tricked them. So I said, I better get it now while I have a chance. So we're calling this 3-part thing, the remote viewing the aliens. And the Cydonia thing is the first part. And what we found about the civilization on Mars was absolutely fascinating. Anyway, we have its own video for that now. This is a video remote viewing session. I'm a video remote viewing project. In the old days, the military guys did remote viewing using paper and pen, and talk about something that was boring to watch. I mean, that's how we all learned remote viewing, the old paper and pen way. And that was good for like photocopying papers and shuffling them around in the intelligence community and so on. But like nobody really wanted to watch that stuff. It was like you had to be a real aficionado, a real dedicated groupie of remote viewing stuff in order to want to see it. So we had to change things. So we got the guys to do remote viewing. Dick Algar was the one who really pioneered this, to do remote viewing using a whiteboard, standing up in a theatrically interesting manner. Now, Dick Algar was a professional newscaster in Hawaii. He was the guy on the news. He was the face of the news in Hawaii for 30 years. And so he was used to being on camera more than he's used to being off camera. So it was natural for him to say, well, I do this. I'm used to talking standing up and telling people things. Why should I be sitting on a desk and doing this thing with a paper and pen? So he was the one who started it. I was very doubtful. Daz Smith thought it was not such a good idea. But it turned out to be great. And so we did that with one remote viewing session in an early project called the Atlantis Project. And it turned out to be great. Then when we did the next project, which was the Great Pyramid of Giza, we decided to make that a remote viewing project with video that had both video and paper and pen. But it was a hefty amount of it. Most of it was on video. That turned out to be really great. And then we said, okay, let's drop the paper and pen completely. So our 9/11 project was totally on video. And that was unbelievable. And then, now we do our projects on video where people are actually watching this stuff come in live. It's not like it's recorded live. And so there's tension when you watch this because you know what the targets are. You know what the things are that they're supposed to be describing. But it's obviously when you're watching the video that they don't know consciously what's going on. But their descriptions are so spot on. You're like on the edge of your seat ready to fall off. because you see how good they really are. And nobody has ever complained that there was a boring minute in any of the video that we have on these things. Anyway, so the new video on Cydonia Mars explains a lot about what that civilization was. We know the whole backstory.
And can you give us a little bit of detail about that, maybe without, expressing too much from the video? What was there?
I don't mind telling you, because you're going to want to see it anyway because of the ability to see the remote viewing sessions done live.
It's so fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, you can hear it from somebody talking about it, but the big impact doesn't come till you watch it with your own eyes. What basically it is humans, when you're remote viewing another human, in general, this is the basic truism, other humans cannot tell if you're remote viewing them. Meaning, you can remote view somebody on another. You can have remote viewers in the United States, remote viewing terrorists, or remote viewing from someone back in the Soviet Union days and the Kremlin walls or something like that. And those guys won't know that you're remote viewing them. But when you do remote view extraterrestrials, very often the extraterrestrials in spaceships and things like that, they actually know you're coming. And when the remote viewers go there, we have lots of situations where they report right away that they're in this type of a thing. There's lights all over the place. The people look strange, and that they're all looking at them.
So they're very aware of the remote viewers.
They're very
presence.
aware, but that never happens with humans. So when we were remote viewing Mars, I was actually interested in to see what would actually happen. And we don't have a single instance where any of the Martians turned around and looked at a remote viewer, meaning they were just like us. In fact, I like to call it they were us when we were there. It was obviously in our very distant past, and they looked like us, they acted like us, they had a civilization like us. Now, the Cydonia region was actually like an island city. It was surrounded by water. And you can see that just from the picture. You can see that it's elevated in that perimeter that has two perfect parallel lines and a perfect perpendicular line and a perfect semicircle. That was like a wall that surrounded the entire thing. So it probably protected them from waves and other things, weathering stuff. But it was a perimeter to the whole thing. And it was like a city. It was a place where people were. And they had society there that was complex. They had the elite, just like we have the elite. They had the religious leaders that had fanatical followers. They had rich people, middle-class people, poor people. They had a shantytown type area. And they had the whole mix. I mean, other than the fact that it was on Mars, you wouldn't have noticed much of a difference between them and us in any major sort of urban type area.
What was the time difference in terms of how long ago did this take place? Was this a couple thousand years ago or a couple million years?
This is really in the distant past. Basically, what happened is the Cydonia region bit the dust because of a planetary catastrophe. It didn't just whimper away. There was a cataclysm of some type. And we've studied this in some of our other projects. So I'm connecting the dots now between our other projects and this. Basically what happened is that where the asteroid belt is now, there used to be a planet, and that planet exploded. Now, the exact reasons for why it exploded, we don't know exactly, but it could have been an act of war or whatever. But there was a planet there that exploded. Now, for those of your listeners who are rolling their eyeballs now, and let me just say, hold on just a little bit.
Not here at this show, I'll tell you that.
Just bear with it a little bit longer. The idea that there was a planet there that was exploded was actually the original idea behind the asteroid belt. And that was challenged, and then what became the orthodoxy was that the asteroid belt was what was leftover garbage from the forming of the solar system from the primordial solar nebula. But there was not a shred of evidence supporting that. Nonetheless, it was easier to think of that than it was to think of a planet exploding. So that became sort of the dominant view of that. Now, a mainstream astronomer named Thomas Van Flandern, who was head of his Department of Celestial Mechanics at the Naval Observatory, who was extremely well published and very mainstream, he assembled an enormous collection of planetary data that was absolutely unambiguous, that nailed it solid. There was a planet there. For whatever reason, it exploded, and that's how the asteroid belt came about. And for those people who sort of might be doubting, how could this be? Just put two and two together. The asteroids are big, solid rocks, for heaven's sake. Some of them are big, like the Ceres asteroid. I mean, they're huge things. You can't get big, solid rocks forming out of the primordial solar nebula. They need a gravity well. They have to be compressed in order to make really hard rocks. So there has to be a big, solid something that sort of sucks them all in and compresses them into rocks. In addition, the asteroids themselves have enormous evidence of having been exposed to extreme searing heat that melted the surface of them. So those asteroids aren't just from the primordial. If they were primordial solar nebula stuff, they'd be like collections of dust that are just sort of clobbed together. They're not. They're solid rocks with metals in them and all types of stuff. And so, just on that alone. So we do have an idea of when this planet exploded. And apparently we're talking like 10 million years ago. So anyway, the evidence does seem to suggest, now we can't say this confirmatively, but it does seem to suggest that Mars was a moon of that planet. When it exploded, Mars was nearby. And so when Mars was nearby, you had a situation where the planet exploded and basically hit Mars with like a shotgun blast of stuff. Now, one half of Mars is heavily cratered, and that same half of Mars is thick, meaning its crust is like a kilometer up to 3 kilometers thicker than the other half of Mars. So the cratered side is both thicker and more cratered, actually, and the other side has no craters on it. So whatever hit Mars hit it from one side and one side only. Now that's what happened to end the prime time of Martian civilization, meaning there were tidal waves, there was enormous cataclysms, and that inundated the Cydonia region. And that's what happened. You see, underneath the face on Mars, they had tunnels, and those tunnels led to subway systems. And we have really good photographs, NASA supplied photographs of subway systems. Of these tunnels.
Is this one of the glass tubular tunnel systems that I think it was Dick Allgaier was drawing?
We have it in the documentary. We have the pictures of the tunnels and his descriptions of these tunnels. And they were, Mars' atmosphere was always thinner than Earth, so pushing things around with airplanes may not have been so easy or so normal for transportation. It was very easy to build subway systems, relatively speaking. So, our atmosphere on the surface of Earth is really thick. Just stick your hand out of the window when you're driving the car. It's really thick. So flying things was a natural process. But in Mars, they had a subway system, and the trains that were used were like the maglev trains that we use on Earth on steroids. They were really fast. And so that was a dominant way to get around on Mars. And so, and Dick Allgaier describes that in explicit detail by going under the so-called face and then following it. But Daz Smith also found these underground tunnels and chambers under the face on Mars as well. But Dick Allgaier was really one who went into the train system and how it was powered and the whole thing. And so, and we have really good, some of these tunnels have been exposed due to erosion on the surface of Mars. So now NASA has really good pictures of these tunnels. So but basically what happened is everything was inundated when that explosion occurred, and the tidal waves and the issue of there being huge oceans covering much of Mars's surface is not in dispute anymore. That it happened for at least hundreds of millions of years. NASA is now willing to say. That's just relatively recent. Within the last couple months, they're willing to say that. So,
if this happened within millions and millions of years, the remnants of whatever had existed there previous, Courtney, was this a technologically advanced society?
Yes.
Far more in advance of us today, or is it similar to our 21st century tech?
It's more advanced than what we are today. They had some elements of technology that were more advanced, and their train system was more advanced than what we have now. Their methods of powering the train system was more advanced. And based on what we have with the Iapetus project, it does seem to suggest, if you connect those two, which is hard for me to do now because the Iapetus thing isn't out yet, but when that does come out, you'll see if we connect the two, it looks like the people back in those days had spacefaring capabilities that were far in advance of what we have today with rockets. But nonetheless, what basically did happen in the society is that they had a mix of people. No matter how advanced the technology is, it doesn't mean that society is without problems. So they had their worker class, their peasant class, their poor people. They had their middle class and everything else, just like we have today. So I like to say they were us when we were there. And so what happened was that event happened on Mars. It was a bad day. And I'm sure a zillion people died. But that was not the end of Martian civilization. That was not the end. You know, it's like what Jeff Goldblum says in Jurassic Park movies, nature finds a way. Society rebuilt itself. And we know that because in the not-too-distant past, within, like, say, 1 million years, or, you know, relatively recently, there was a fission nuclear surface explosion on Mars. And that, among people who are willing to look at the data and acknowledge what they're seeing, is absolutely not in dispute. There's a book out. There's actually been a couple books out, but the most recent book came out in March of this year by John Brandenburg called Death on Mars. Details the nuclear forensic evidence in terms of radioisotope readings, including, you know, usually focusing on the xenon readings. They exactly match that of a fission nuclear reactor, a fission nuclear explosion on the surface. The characteristics, the signature characteristics, are perfect, and that level of nuclear forensics can't be cheated. And they know where the bomb went off. They know its impact on the antipode, which is the exact opposite spot of the planet where it happened. And that's what finally did it with the Martian atmosphere. So when the other planet nearby exploded, that was a bad day, and I'm certain Mars wasn't such a happy place to live on for a long while. But that didn't end it. What finally ended it was the nuclear explosion that blew off the rest of the atmosphere. And what we have on Mars today is a result of that.
Do we find any evidence in these remote viewing situations where we have an idea of kind of what led to the advancements or the evolution, if you will, of humanity? I mean, what you're talking about is very spot on with a lot of research that I've read into, with the video that I watched of yours. A lot of things kind of coming together for me right now and over the past couple of months, my research into this subject. And another topic that Ira and I had been talking about in the past couple of weeks was evidence of nuclear explosions here on Earth dating back a couple of 100,000, maybe a couple million years, vitrified sand out in the desert near the areas of Mesopotamia around the Fertile Crescent. And we have evidence and proof of that here on Earth. Is there any evidence that whatever existed there came here to Earth, and we are either an evolutionary step backwards from them, or perhaps we were engineered from their scientific programs? Do you have any evidence or any clues into any of that?
Well, in terms of evolutionary status, I will say, in my opinion, we are the most, or one of the most advanced species in the galaxy in terms of evolutionary status. And the reason I'm willing to say that is I'm not saying that our technology is more advanced. There are clearly extraterrestrial civilizations that have greater levels of technology. And it's not saying that our civilization has become more advanced than them. We're still sort of primitive in our own ways. But ourselves, our human nature, our characteristics, we're on the absolute cutting edge of the development of consciousness. And the reason is we as humans think of ourselves as very isolated individuals. Ryan, you're Ryan. Ira, you're Ira. Courtney, I'm Courtney. we're really separated, and we don't have a very clear telepathic connection between everybody else, ourselves. We think of ourselves as isolated individuals, and we like to take hikes out in the woods all by ourselves so we can experience the loneliness. We like to travel across the country in a car all by ourselves so we can experience the exploration. Back in the old Wild West days, we would have people going out and exploring, the lonely wanderers. We love solitary walks on the beach. We love interacting with a new lover, making love with that special person, discovering the personality, as individuals, bringing something to us so that we can grow as an individual. That apparently is very different from almost everything else that goes on in the galaxy. And most species out there have a much closer bonding. They live more connected telepathically. They communicate normally telepathically, meaning all those boundaries are not there. So what you can say is some species have actually referred to us, humans, as the masters of limitations. And so what we are is a species that is refining the idea of being cut off from everything else. And it is blankety-blank scary to a lot of other people in the galaxy. So when I say we're advanced, I'm saying like we are on the cutting edge of isolating ourselves from everybody else. And it's very much like the guy who goes to the edge of the bridge, ties a rope around his ankle and then jumps off. And you say, my gosh, he's bungee jumping and he's bouncing around and there's nothing holding him from complete obliteration other than a rope that's tied to his ankle as he's bouncing and bouncing up and down connected to the bridge. Well, that's the way the rest of the galaxy looks at us. It's like, how in the world did they do that? I mean, it's so scary. And so a lot of other people are saying, how far can you push this concept of isolation? So no, we don't have a technologically advanced society that's equivalent to many extraterrestrials. The level of grandeur that they have in those societies may be, dwarfing us. But when they look at us, they're jaw drops. Their jaw drops. They look at like, oh my God, how could they do that? That's so scary, such an adventure. And so when you think of the Martians, you say, okay, well, here they are, Martians. The whole civilization went belly up. Now you think about it. Remote viewing, if it does anything, it clearly demonstrates that we're more than our physical body. So that when the physical body dies off, what are we going to do? So now there's two ways you can get here. You can get here in the few that could have escaped on ships, but you're talking small numbers. And then you're talking about, dying, and then you're saying afterwards, without a body, you're saying, well, where am I going to go next? What would be the most logical place? Are you going to skip galaxies? Or are you going to go to another solar system? What you do is say, well, what's nearby? And so it's very likely that a great number of humans that are here on the planet are, in fact, former Martians that decided to come here. And so you can assume that our society reflects what Martian society was like because we're the same people. You can assume that is true. Now, we don't have direct remote viewing evidence of that, but it makes sense. Where would they go? They're going to come here. So this planet is a nearby place.
Kind of like a refugee camp almost.
Yeah. Actually, in fact, looking at this planet as a refugee planet is a very useful analogy because this planet is a very unfavorable planet to live on in terms of a long-term civilization. It's very unstable. And so anybody who would normally come here would do so only under duress. For example, this planet is an 8,000-mile diameter ball of liquid molten rock. It's a lake of liquid molten rock. And it's covered by an 8-mile thin crust. And everything that lives on it is living on this crust, floating on an ocean of liquid rock. Now you can say, yeah, but it looks stable. Yeah, it's all right. It is stable for 1,000 years, 2,000 years, 4,000 years, 20,000 years. But eventually the sun will burp in our direction with a coronal mass ejection. And when it does, it'll cause ripples in the liquid below, and the crust will crinkle and do all types of stuff, meaning it is not possible for a planetary civilization excuse me, to last here very long before the civilization crumbles and we have to start all over again. Now, this was actually detailed, the sort of history of this, in yet another book, this one written by an academic at Boston University named Robert Schoch. That's S-C-H-O-C-H, and he's a tenured professor at Boston University, and he's written a number of books, but one of them, a recent one, is called Forgotten Civilization, The Role of Solar Outbursts in Our Past and Future. And that's a very useful book because it describes a great many archaeological anomalies that clearly indicate that we didn't start our civilization 3,000 years ago. For example, the Göbekli Tepe archaeological finds, which are relatively recent, but they're extraordinary, extensive, a few hundred acres of buildings that were at least as advanced as the Great Pyramid type stuff. They were all buried. They were purposely buried by the builders as if they were trying to protect their civilization from something that was raining down on them from the sky. And to actually have constructed those things and to have basically buried a whole city, but not buried it to get rid of it, buried it to live under, that took an enormous amount of effort. Clearly, they were trying to protect themselves from something. You also get other anomalies that were discussed in Cremo's book, Forbidden Archaeology. That's Michael Cremo's book, where you clearly have evidence of advanced civilization in the past that made things made things out of metal and so on. And then we have a project that we did at Farsight Institute called the Atlantis Project, and the Atlantis Project is a very clear description of an ancient civilization, only 70,000 years ago, ancient, so we're not talking long, that lived on Earth that was technologically more advanced than us by about a year, by about 100 years. They were very close. And they destroyed themselves, leaving really great ruins, really great evidence of the civilization that are buried under the ocean, but we have really good Google Earth imagery of this, sonar imagery of the ruins, say 1,000 miles west of Morocco, Portugal, 3 miles deep of the city, and also down near Antarctica. And we did a remote viewing project on those particular spots and discovered the whole thing. They had a very advanced civilization, again about 100 years more advanced than us. And they had a secret science project where they were digging with like boreholes out near Australia's New Zealand area. And they were trying to drill through the crust to get at the heat below, and they thought they'd be able to contain it. It was just a super big mistake. They popped the balloon. They had a major blowout. I mean, you're talking a blowout like a quarter. It was a huge blowout, bigger than any nuclear bomb type thing that you could ever imagine, on that whole corner. And that spot out near New Zealand has the thinnest crust on the planet. It also has the largest concentration of a volcanic rock. Anyway, so what happened was, with that blowout, you also get a dent. And the dent always happens in the antipode, which is the exact opposite spot of the planet, which is exactly where the civilization evidence is on the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. So Europe didn't used to end at Portugal. Europe actually extended at least 1,000 miles further west. And that whole area went down when the blowout occurred down near New Zealand. So that's the kind of that's the kind of planet we live on. So this is not the planet of first choice. This is a planet of last resort because there's so much volatility associated with it, both stuff that we do to it, but also stuff that's natural to it. But what you can say about this planet is it's a perfect planet for a biological and zoological garden, a place to grow animals and plants. I mean, this is where it's supposed to be. But for a long-term civilization, it's hell. And so and we also have really severe weather, hurricanes, the atmosphere is thick, the gravity is heavy, got all types of problems. But nonetheless, and again, there are no serious problems over 1,000 years, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years. It's okay. But when you stand out like 20,000 years, something is going to happen that's going to, boil us down. And again, Robert Schoch's book, Forgotten Civilization, details a lot of this stuff.
It's the long-term effects that lead to
It's the long-term effects. So you just don't look around and say everything looks stable today. I mean, that's ridiculous. The long-term effects is what you look for. And a civilization needs long-term stuff. So when the Martians came here, a few of them probably came in ships. The rest of them died there and just got born here. That was the sort of the natural way to do things. And we are the way we are. If you want to know what Martians are like, look at the way we are. We're the same people. So,
Courtney, we have one quick listener question for you from
go ahead.
From Mike, and then in the ending of this question, if you could answer that, and then go ahead and if you want, take a minute or two to give out your websites again and any additional information that you would like to let the listeners know about. So, Ira, I think you have the question.
Yeah, basically the question is it possible through remote viewing, is it possible to do things like maybe remote viewing God? Is that a possibility? And then a second maybe sort of tied in kind of question is remote viewing something that anybody can do? Can anybody be trained to do it? So I guess
let me start with the second question first. The answer is yes. There is some natural talent associated with it. Being an artist is actually very good, meaning if you can draw, that's good, because anyone can perceive anything, but you have to be able to describe what you're perceiving. However, let me say that it is very simple to start, because if you go to our website, farsight.org, to www.farsight.org, and if you go to the SRV, that's S like in Sierra Romeo Victor, section for instruction, you'll see a complete course in remote viewing. We're talking video lessons, and all free video lessons, as well as there's a 18-hour 24-lesson audio course that's for free, plus there's video lessons for free. There's a free printable text and all of that stuff, and just about everybody who learns remote viewing starts there. And then so yes, anybody can do this, but it's like anything else. You can have some great experiences yourself. If you want to get really good at it, you're talking like, learning how to play the piano. You have to work at it. But now the second question was, what was the second question? I forgot.
Can you remote view? Go ahead, Ira.
Oh, God, the God question. Yes, actually, I was given that target myself a while, in my early days. You can remote view God, but you have to be able to understand what you're going to get. Now, and I can give the best way to answer that question is my own personal experience doing that. What I found when that was given to me as a blind target, I found a civilization, and there were two different times when I had that type of a target. The one time was I found a civilization, and the civilization was advancing and learning and just growing by itself, and I went through like a whole series of experiences about what that civilization was like at its various stages. And my interpretation of that was that we are God, meaning there is no separation between us and God. God is living us through us, so we are the same thing. And so, God is learning what it feels like to be Ira by having Ira. I mean, Ira is not different from God. And the same thing with Ryan. Ryan is not different from God. There is God is simply saying, I wonder what it would be like to be Ryan. So that's who you are. And so a whole civilization is like that. Now, at the other time that I had an experience like that, where that was a target, these are extreme sort of esoteric type targets, but occasionally they happen. And when those happen, what I got was a sense of a being who was solitary and incredibly in pain and anguish. It was not a physical being, but it was like a globular thing. And to end its solitary nature, it was conflicted within itself. And to end its solitary nature, it let itself break apart into pieces so it could communicate with itself and have the individual personalities within it. And so it exploded. It simply it exploded itself. And that was the birth of existence. That was the birth of the universe. And the sense was that if that being had not fulfilled itself, if that being had not let itself explode, creating all exists, then it would have gone mad. It was not a happy situation. It was the level of depth of penetration, of the pain, of isolation was beyond anything that we could ever imagine. And it was a solution. And with the explosion, which the birth of life, it was a released level of joy beyond anything imaginable. it had grown, it had given birth, it had become existence. And when that means that when you experience life and you experience something that is literally God not sort of watching you do it, that is God literally experiencing it. So when you experience something that's really thrilling, that is literally God experiencing something thrilling. That also means that God can be shocked by things that happen, like when the Holocaust happened. As we look at it and say, how could we have done such a thing? I mean, this is great. That means that's God saying, how could that have happened? How could I have, that's me who did that? So and when you make love to your significant other, that joy is not being watched by God. That is God experiencing that. That's what it means. And so, can you remote view God? Yeah, but what you get back, you have to be flexible enough to be able to try to figure it out.
Try to interpret it.
Yeah. So anyway, the bottom line is, for those people who want more, go to farsight.org. That's the main website you want to start with. And first thing, for heaven's sake, click on the subscribe to the free newsletter. We never give the email addresses out for any reason whatsoever, and that's the only way we have to communicate with people, to let people know what we're doing, by sending out our weekly newsletter, which has a comic, and you're going to want to see the comic. It has a great comic. A lot of people get the newsletter just to get the comic. And so it's a really great comic in terms of, I do it. I mean, previously, Vic Guiza, a celebrated cartoonist in Mexico, did it. But it's an interesting style of comics. A lot of people, it's become quite popular. Anyway, so get the free newsletter, and then click on there's a ton of free stuff. Almost the entire website is free. But click on all the free stuff, and then also click on some of the project. Watch the trailers for the big video documentaries. Some of the video documentaries we have to release through Vimeo as video on demand or DVDs on Amazon, because they're long, they're big video type movie things, and that was the only venue that was available for us. But all the shorter ones and stuff like that, including web series, we even have a science fiction web series out. Those are all free, and all the instructional stuff is free, and a lot of other stuff you'll see when you just go. But basically, sign up for the newsletter, and then click on the big Cydonia banner at the top, so you get a head start into where the main project is that we've been talking about today.
Well, Courtney Brown, thank you very much for joining us on The Secret Teachings, and Ira as well. Thank you for coming on this conversation and talking with us for a little bit. I really had a great time. I'd love to have you back on the show sometime in the future, Courtney. Really, really, really insightful stuff. And again, the listeners, go check out farsight.org. That's FARSIGHT, farsight.org. I'll keep it linked up at thesecretteachings.info as well. Courtney, if you could stay with us for just one moment off air so we could talk to you.
Sure.
Other than that...
I want to say thank you so much for inviting me on the show, and I'll be glad to come back.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that. And Ira, do you have any last comments?
The concepts that you were giving there of God were just amazing. Definitely look into doing remote viewing. I've experimented with it myself. If I can do it, anybody can do it.
Well, thank you guys very much. Courtney, we'll speak to you here in just a few minutes. And again, we'll love to have you back on The Secret Teachings. Our website, www.thesecretteachings.info. That's www.thesecretteachings.info. On our website will be links to Courtney Brown's work, including their main website, farsight.org. Remember, Courtney Brown is the founder and director of the Farsight Institute. So go check out what they have going on. And I watched the Cydonia Mars video. Very lengthy, but very informative, and some stuff that we've talked about here on The Secret Teachings before, being, I guess, gaining some credibility through the phenomenon of remote viewing. I'm your host, Ryan Gable, and for Courtney Brown and Ira Robinson, this is The Secret Teachings. We'll speak to you next week.